Morning for the Oregon State Board of Agriculture meeting. Today is Wednesday, June 14, 2023. This is Luisa Santamaria, Chair of the Board. This meeting is now called to order. I would like to begin by asking the Department of Agriculture Board Coordinator Carla Balnes to review a few housekeeping items for the meeting.
Good morning, this is Carla. We'd like to remind people to please mute your phones and computer so we can avoid any background noises. And if you're joining the call by video conference, we request that only board members and presenters turn on your webcam during the call. And if you are joining by conference call only, pre-meeting materials are posted on the ODA website at https://oda.direct/board agriculture, and additional items will be posted after the meeting. And a reminder that this meeting is being recorded.
All right. Thank you, Carla. Carla, will you please call the roll for introductions? And I think I'm going to begin. My name is Luisa Santamaria. I'm a public member, Oregon State University.
Chad Allen.
Here. Here.
Barbara Boyer is excused today. Brian Harper.
Brian Harper, farmer, Junction City.
Shante Johnson. Miguel Lopez. Elin Miller.
Elin Miller, farmer, Umpqua, and welcome to Roseburg.
Eric Oram.
Eric Oram, farmer, Heppner, Oregon.
Randy Savati. And Josh Zielinski.
Josh Zielinski, farmer, Salem, Oregon.
Dean Simonich is excused, and Acting Director Lauren Henderson.
Good morning, everyone. Lauren Henderson, Acting Director at the Department of Agriculture.
And my name is Carla Valnes with the Department of Agriculture. If you are joining us in person, we'd invite you to please sign in on the sign-in sheet. And if you're joining us online, to please add your name in the chat box for a record for us. And I don't think we have anybody else joining us. Oh, Jim, do you want to jump on and introduce yourself? Jim Johnson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Johnson, Land Use and Water Planning Coordinator for the Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Great, and we'll go around the room. Taylor, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Taylor Harding with the Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Chris?
Chris Benman, Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Jonathan Santa, Assistant Director, Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Rusty Rock, Program Area Director, Food Safety Animal Health.
Jess Paulson, Program Director, Market Access and Certification.
Okay. Thank you, Carla. All right. So today we have a public comment that is scheduled at 10:15. We have received 24 written public comments and no request to provide verbal comments today in today's meeting. So if you would like somebody to sign up this morning to provide verbal comments in person, please use the sign up sheet on the table prior to comment period. If you are joining the meeting online, please make a request using the chat box, including your name and organization. Comment time will be limited to 3 minutes per person if we have someone here to do it. One more time, this meeting is being recorded, and I will ask members and guests to please state your name for the record before you begin your comments. Okay, let's go to the agenda item 1. And so we need to approve the minutes from the February meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Elin Miller, for the record, move to approve.
Okay.
Josh Zielinski, second.
Thank you. So it is moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion of the minutes? Not yet. Yes. Yeah, so we don't have any discussion, so we can go ahead. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. So do we have remotely, Eric? Did we hear? Did he say yes? Okay. So based on the outcome of the vote, we have the quorum. So the ayes have either the motion passes. All right. So we're done with this. We're going to move to our next item. And I'm going to ask the acting director, Lauren Henderson, to give us his update.
So once again, Lauren Henderson, Acting Director at the Department of Agriculture. Good morning. I'll try to be brief so we can somewhat stay on schedule, but I do have a couple items that I wanted to mention today. The first one, and we'll talk more about that in the next item, is watching very closely what's happening in the Capitol around agency budgets and whether we actually have one or not. I wanted to mention whatever happens, it's going to be okay. I get asked that a lot about a little bit of terror, I think, for those that have not been through this before. I've been through it many times, and it always seems to work itself out. We always seem to get a budget. We may not be exactly what we want, but there are contingency plans and continuing resolutions, and I've already looked at them and how we do that. And it takes a little bit of creativity to get through that pause if you have to do that. But I'm hopeful we'll actually come out with state budgets and not have to deal with that too long. So that's what I wanted to mention about that, because it can get real complicated real fast. The key to that is for our staff to make sure that they know that things are going to be okay. And on July 1, they're still going to have the same job they had before. I had somebody say, "Oh, I was hoping for a couple of weeks off." I said, "No, you can take a couple of weeks off, but you're not going to get it that way. We have lots of work to do." But anyway, I've been through it several times, and it always works itself out. The second thing is, I think once we do get a good idea of where our budget is, my executive team, we're going to really work hard on trying to recruit and get some of our vacancies filled. That's got to be our priority. We've got several in some key places. I just had our IT director retire this last month. That is a huge hole in our agency. You all know we've talked about this before. We're only one or two deep in some places in our agency, and I've really made it a goal of mine over the last year to continue to do more in the area of succession planning. We already had that and then started that, but it's even probably more critical now to make sure. And what that means is you may see some new faces at board meetings. You may see some new faces out. It may seem like, why are there two people here today? Well, that's all part of that. And making sure that people have experiences and are able to at least have some recognition of that. That being said, we're going to actually have an all-staff meeting coming up this summer where we actually take our staff who normally don't get the opportunity to be out. Think of those in the administrative areas, and that's to get them out on a farm and actually have them, one, do something that they probably don't ever get a chance to do, but help connect the dots on what all of our programs do. And I've challenged our program directors to work together across programs for even themselves to know what happens across the programs, because that's I think a really important part of being a team. The other thing is just managing our workload. We have a lot of projects coming up this summer that we haven't been able to get to, that we're going to need to get done, and it's just going to be managing that. We have some opportunities in grant programs, depending on how the budget comes up, that are great when you get additional funds, but it's a lot of work to do grant programs and make them a credible program and yet still meet the goals of those programs. So those are the things we're going to focus on really this summer, along with our normal work that happens in the summer, which is a lot of field work And then you've heard me say this before, our challenges to recruit and retain employees is an ever challenge and is gonna be one for a while. And we're really moving forward with cross-utilization of staff in different programs. That takes training. It takes a little bit of HR work, but we have to do that or we're not gonna be successful. The other thing I wanted to mention, which is really very exciting, it's not often that you get a call to say, hey, Lauren, you're getting $5.9 million to the Department of Ag, and this came from USDA, but that happened to me. I was expecting a call, but I was not expecting $5.9 million. And what it was for is the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Program. That's a USDA program. And they announced the allocations nationwide in May. I don't have a lot of details about the program. We're just learning about it now, but really the purpose is to assist the states in efforts to build resilience in the middle of the supply chain. You know, that came out of COVID and some of the issues with there. You've heard me talk about the state meat inspection program and improving the processing that. This is a continuation of that. The goal of the program is just to create food system infrastructure to support competitive and profitable market access for our domestic farms products. We have to put in a state plan by August, and that is going to be difficult to do all of the outreach and meet the goals and get that in there. The good news is it's a 4-year grant opportunity or program opportunity, will end in May of 2027. I will be going to Denver to the Western States Department of Ag meeting and then NASDA in September. And I think there will be some discussion about can we all have a little bit more time, but we will have to submit something in August. And it may be a plan to put a deeper, more detailed plan together. But you'll hear lots about that as we go along here. As I said, I just got this call in May and was actually asked in a week to sign the cooperative agreement. And luckily, we have some good relationships at the executive branch level and at LFO, and they rushed that through because I could not sign that without their permission to do that. It's really focused on underserved farmers and ranchers, new and beginning farmers and ranchers, veteran producers, and processors and other middle of the supply businesses owned by socially disadvantaged individuals, and those would be as defined by the Small Business Administration. So it's a non-competitive grant. It doesn't require a match from the state, which is good. It does require that we ask for matches of those that are getting those dollars, so it will be leveraged, but the state doesn't have to actually come up with a match itself. We need to get busy in the department to figure this out and kind of put some plans together, and we will be working on that in the next few weeks. And so we may do some outreach to you folks and say help and that, and then I will, after this meeting, I'm supposed to be getting a template for what that plan would look like and what we're supposed to include this week. I received one, but it wasn't the right one, and they recalled it. So once I send that, we'll try to share that with folks so they can be thinking, we're going to need help, I think, across the state and how best to serve that there. The last thing I wanted to mention is the direct recruitment is slowly proceeding. It's at the stage now where they're organizing and scheduling interviews, and that's where it's at today. I think the goal is still to try to have a name by September. But as I said before, I don't think there's a imminent hurry for that. And they obviously want to do the due diligence to do that, and the recruiting company is working through schedules and going through those things. So that's where that's at now. We're doing fine, I think, with what we have, other than we need more people. And I'm really missing a deputy director right now. Jonathan is wearing multiple hats and doing really well at that. And the legislature, as you know, just is all consuming when that happens. So, but we'll get there, and more to come on that. Let's see, did I get my list? Yeah, I think that's my update. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, we're going to continue with our meeting, and the second item in our agenda is ODA budget and legislative update. The presenter is Jonathan Sando, ODA Assistant Director. Thank you, Jonathan.
Good morning, Chair Santa Maria, Acting Director Henderson, board members of the board, Jonathan Sandow, Assistant Director here at the Department of Ag. Session. It is slowly standing where it is. The progress has been still moving on through committee activities, even though the Senate chamber has kind of been at a standstill for a few weeks. But if you've seen the news articles recently, there is a lot of optimism that there will be a successful end to the session. The constitutional sine die is next Sunday, the 25th, June 25th. And so we're coming up on about a week and a half left until the constitutional sine die. But I think in the building and around, and definitely through the reporting that has been done, the optimism for a successful end of session has definitely started to rise and to be more communicated. So where does that, what's left and what's kind of in play for us in terms of the legislative pieces? I'd say one, the budget bill, we'll go through the budget details in a little bit, but the budget bill, the ODA budget bill is 5002, House Bill 5002, and it passed off the House floor on June 7th. And so it'll be first read, actually I think it's scheduled today to be first read in the Senate chamber. And it will be on the calendar, awaiting any further action on the Senate floor. And then the other big policy bills that I think are pretty impactful for natural resource agencies and the natural resource sector at large is one, Senate Bill 85, which is the CAFO bill. That moved out of the full Ways and Means Committee last week. Or actually this Monday, moved out of full Ways and Means. And it will be on the Senate floor, waiting any Senate action in that chamber, and then we'll jump to the House side and wait any action on the House side. The other ones are House Bill 2010, which is the pretty comprehensive drought package that has a lot of pieces to it. And that one, again, has moved out of the committee, full Ways and Means on Monday. It'll go to the House side for votes and then to the Senate side for end of session work. And then House Bill 3409, which is the kind of energy climate package, which has a lot of investments into the natural resource space, along with other sectors and changes. A lot of the changes at the Global Warming Commission, Department of Energy, and that one, again, same trajectory, passed out of full Ways and Means Monday, and we'll go to the House floor and then awaiting any activity on the Senate side. And those are the two really big policy packages that have a lot of bills that had public hearings, a lot of bills that had amendments. They kind of mashed them into two pretty significant packages. And so a lot of details in those. And then, of course, there's always the end of session spending bills, which move a lot of either typically one-time funding and or other investments. And the rumor is if once the Senate begins floor procedures, if and when they start beginning floor procedures, they'll do a final full Ways and Means Committee, which then will move across the end of session bills, which will have a series of investments. We would anticipate some of them, but we have not seen any details or amendments on those pieces on what's clearly defined in there. So that is the trajectory for the rest of the next 10 days in the legislature. And as Director Henderson had mentioned, there's contingency plans for if there's not a successful end of session. But I think right now everything is pointing towards a hopeful end of session, successful end of session. I don't think too many folks want to have a special session immediately following or giving up the month of July to get things done either. So that is the quick legislative update. So on I think it's behind tab 2, maybe in your guys' folders, is our budget breakdown. You've seen this format before. We've talked through these formats in the past. And this one is comparing to what is in House Bill 5002 compared to what was our governor's budget. And so you've seen the format, the process here, right? You've seen the format from our agency request budget, which then became the governor's budget, and we've had the similar format. And now this is the LFO recommendation, which is in 5002. And then we will produce yet another one of these once total session is over, and it'll encompass anything that's included in the end of session bill as well. And we'll have that one for the Tillamook or the next meeting. So kind of, the progressions on the budget process line up with the versions of this format that you see. And again, I'm not going to read word for word in this, but just kind of explain each major category. On the top there, you can kind of see the different outlines of funding levels across the iterations. Again, I'll note for folks in the room and online, the significant difference between the 21-23 legislative approved budget and then the subsequent columns there was the $40 million for the disaster one-time funding for that disaster program, $5 million the one-time funding for grasshoppers and cricket suppression. So a lot of one-time funding was wrapped into that 21-23 budget. And so, yes, it looks like, there's a $50 million drop in, general fund, but that is not, those were a lot of that one-time funding packages. So the more accurate leveling is within those three columns. To the right. And so again, the significant changes are measuring against the governor's budget. And so kind of what happened between, the governor's budget and then 5002. A lot of this was driven by the economic forecast. If you guys have read or either watched the economic revenue forecasts out of the legislature, the most recent one for the June revenue forecast was particularly strong. A good chunk of revenue, a historic level of personal kicker and corporate kicker expected. And so there was a lot more kind of the stable funding for the state budget writers to restore a lot of, the potential cuts that were included. And so the first major list there, the removal of the additional, package 091, a lot of the technical terms, but this is restoring a lot of the pieces that were in the governor's budget, either as fund shifts and or reductions. They are now just back into our continuing service level as our base budget funding. So you can see those have kind of stabilized. Statewide adjustments, those are typical for every state agency, so nothing terribly exciting there. Turning on to the second page, at least for my layout, second page. I think maybe the more next significant piece is the vacant position reductions. The budget has taken the three positions from the agency that were identified as like long-term vacancies, so they hadn't been filled in over, I think the cutoff was about 20 months or greater. And so those are three positions that are being reduced from the agency. I will note though that we do have the natural resource specialist 4, that was an ag water quality position, which we had built a lot of our fiscals around the water positions around. That position is added back through the water package. And so it will balance itself out there, but repurposing the purpose of that position as well to align better with the new workload that would come out of that water package. So there is that little bit of a caveat, again, pending all of these things pass in time. We had two fee bills really to reconcile fees that we had raised in the in the previous biennium, and then one to reconcile the weight and measures fee increase that we're proposing. And then the next long section there, I'll just highlight a few of them, and Director Henderson can definitely talk more about the lab complex. But this was not an easy lift and a heavy lift, especially for Director Henderson and the folks involved in the lab complex to get this across the finish line. Multi-year project, but it is in our budget. It is built into the budget at the right level of funding that is needed for us to move our labs to the Wilsonville complex. And I think I can confidently say that once that building is done and we are occupants of it, we will absolutely get the board back in there, right? Because we took the tour when it was a dug up shell of a building, and it will be exciting to go back through it once it is complete. And then I guess if you jump back to the column side, you'll see the correlating jump in general fund there from about the 31 million level to about the 37 million level. That is incorporating pretty much that $5.6 million in general fund for the lab complex. The other significant change is working with the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission on setting up a reference lab within the Wilsonville complex, or the North Valley complex, and building out kind of a cannabis reference lab there as well. 2.2 million of other funds is a significant package as well. The other one I would highlight is the Japanese beetle eradication, package 310. This is on my page 3. That is about half. I think it's exactly half of what we requested in the governor's, what was in the governor's budget. And the reasoning there is it's funds it for 1 year. We have been asked via the budget process essentially to fund the eradication effort for another year, and then come back with a report to the legislature, kind of detailing what either the long-term plans are, kind of what the next steps would look like in terms of continuing funding or the need assessment for Japanese beetle eradication. And so that's why that one would look different if you were to compare these things side by side. The other add I would say is the package 420 farm to school infrastructure grants. This had been previously contained in the Department of Education's budget, and we relied on a transfer between agencies, which is can be a time-consuming process. And so now the legislature has put this into our budget, and at the level of 500,000 general fund. And then the last one down below is a package that we have previously talked about within our food safety program to look at it through the equity lens of our inspections and our kind of compliance rates and records. And that was in our governor's budget, but did not make it into the LFO, the legislative budget. So that one is the one policy package that was there and is not currently in this one. So with that, again, this is a quick summary of 5002, our budget bill. Passed the House, should be ready to go for any pending Senate action. With that, I'll stop there and take any questions or move on.
Elin Miller, couple hopefully quick questions. One in the 2010 package, because it was pretty huge and now it's smaller. But do you know what, is there a match or is there something? Because what I understand with the water, like mapping, USGS is critical for being able to accomplish that kind of thing, to look at water issues. Is that marrying up in any way, or maybe it's something for a follow-up to talk about? Because we were talking about water things in our work group last night, And I've just heard that the USGS stuff is really where the major funding can come from to complement something like this bill.
Yes, Jonathan, that's a good question, and I will follow up with that because a lot of that is going to live with OWRD and kind of where they've really engaged on that. And so I can get more information around maybe the nexus that the work that they're being directed to do and kind of the alignment with those pieces.
Okay. And the second is just a kind of a technical question with the good phone call that you received, Director Henderson, on the 5.9 million. How does that end up showing up? Will it end up increasing the federal funds maybe by half because this is a biennium or it's a 4-year program or something?
Yeah, Lauren Henderson, Acting Director. That is a very good question. It's not in there yet. I merely asked the legislature for permission to sign the agreement, knowing that I would have to go back for the limitation. So once we get our plan together, there will not be an opportunity for me to do that until February, if they have a February, which I think they will, or subsequent e-boards for that. My guess is they will ask me to allocate it based on how we think the money's going to go out. We did that with specialty crops when we got started, and then it was on an e-board by e-board basis, and then they finally said, it looks like this is stable funding for you, so we're just going to give you the limitation. So the money will be available to us. It's the permission to spend it, the rate that I need it. But I don't anticipate any issues with going to the e-board and allocating it out. And it will, that number that you're seeing in front of you does not include that 5.9 today.
Okay. Thank you.
And while we're on that, I wanted to add a couple things and then go back to questions. This is my normal reminder that 57% of this budget is dependent on other funds. Those other funds are dependent on cash. And like all of you in your businesses, if the revenue's not there, you cannot spend it. Or if you do, you're being irresponsible. And so we don't want to be that, have never been that. So it's just a reminder for all of us that we have to watch our cash balances. We have to watch what we're doing with our fees. We work very closely with our partners to make sure that the fees are transparent in what we do and why we need them. But that number keeps growing. Inflation, there's inflation costs, and I hear, oh, that's great, you got inflation. Well, it's not great because I don't get any more cash to go with that and those other fund programs. And so that's the business of agriculture, and that's what I remind folks. And so we have to keep an eye on that. The second thing I wanted to put out there concerning the labs is this did take a long time. All good things take time. This was an important bucket list item for me because if you're going to have science in your agency and you're going to use that science in the way that we do for all the important things that we do, you have to be technologically up to date. And our facility just wasn't. It was good for the times that we had. It was not good in mixed use space in our building for lots of reasons. This amount of funding for the first time in my tenure at ODA actually fully funds our laboratory infrastructures and the rent costs and the building costs. It's never kept up before. This does that. The other thing I wanted to mention is I've heard a lot of concerns from our agriculture partners that use those labs, concerned about the distance now 30 miles away from Salem. We have thought through that, and we do not believe in what we're doing that there will be a disruption of service or a delay in service. We believe we have that figured out. Most of the samples that were coming to Salem can still come to Salem. There will be shuttles going back and forth and those kinds of things. And so the trade-off for that is we have a building that can actually keep up with the demands that we need scientifically. And this is about not today, it's really about 20 years from now? Do we have something 20 years from now? And the opportunity arose itself to get this in place now and not wait, because our agency, and my big fear, and I have no issues putting this on record, my big fear is we would be in a spot where we needed to upgrade the facilities and remember the 57% fees, that it would fall flatly on those fee payers to have to pay for the whole thing. And that is very difficult to pay for infrastructure costs that way. It just doesn't work. The other funded programs do pay for the sample costs, you know, but the infrastructure costs to be a lab, I've always told people it costs millions just to call yourself a lab and have the door still closed, let alone be open. So those are the couple things I wanted to mention there.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you. I don't know if we have any question from the members joining us remotely. Do we, Erin? No, we don't have any question. Eric, do you have a question? No? All right. Thank you. Just want to be sure. Okay, so I think, thank you, Jonathan, for your presentation. And we're going to go to our next item in the agenda, that is the agriculture, trade mission, and trade promotions. We have the presenter, we have 19 organizations on the panel this morning to provide comments on legislative priorities and updates. Each organization will have 3 minutes, is that right?
Nope, sorry.
Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead with Jess Paulson, OTA Market Access and Certification Program Director. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you, Lisa. And for the record, Jess Paulson, Program Area Director for Market Access and Certification Programs, which I like to shorten down to the Marketing Director. It's just easier. Carla, are we able to put the presentation on the screen? So we've been trying to have this presentation for a while now. It was supposed to happen back in Ontario in 2020, which obviously didn't happen. And then a lot of things have happened since, and then we have had a couple of other delays and more things have happened since. So I'm trying to wrap up more than is probably reasonable to cover in a quick presentation, but I'd like to impress upon the board the variety of activities that the department engages in to advance the interests of Oregon agriculture. Go to the next slide, please.
Jess, can we make sure that those online can see your presentation? Can everybody see this? Eric, can you see it?
I think.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
So the department, and this isn't a full list of the types of things that we work in, but in general terms, we have a number of tools at our disposal. I put intentionally at the top here our governor missions, and I'll be hitting each of these kind of as we work through. This is more of a table of contents of sorts at the top here. But governor's missions, if we go back real quick, this is the only place I'm touching on the office that we have that does this. It's a small team. The photo there is the team that we work with. Of course, Chris Anderson, who's in the bottom left of that picture, retired at the end of last year, but I can't help but include her in this because she's been a big part of it. But this is a small group of people that we have doing our outreach on both the marketing and development side. The program's name is Agricultural Development and Marketing Program, which we will refer to as ADMP. And I just want to make sure that you're familiar with them. I won't go through each of them, but they're a hardworking crew. Carla, if you mind. So the governor's missions are probably the highest highline and most engaging activities that we do. It's working with a lot of partners from across the state. I listed their Business Oregon, Travel Oregon, the Port of Portland, but whenever the governor travels, it's going to be representing the full breadth of the economy of Oregon, our political and cultural relationships. And so there's a lot that we try to weave together. There's a lot of competing interests. There's a lot of big wigs at the table It's a very stressful but rewarding activity. One of the main things that we appreciate having the attention of the governor for these missions for, and that we try to build around, is the attention that it garners. If we travel by ourselves, really it's only the people that we're meeting with directly that are going to be aware of it. But when you travel with the governor, you get a lot of media attention. There's high-level government meetings. We host a large reception, and usually that reception will be there at a big hotel or at the ambassador's residence or somewhere in the embassy. People are usually more willing to take time out of their schedules to attend those events if it's going to be something with the governor, something at the ambassador's residence. So there's just a certain level of engagement that we get with the governor's participation than we do otherwise. Something to keep in mind is that the governor doesn't travel to make the deals. Usually when we're going, it's to finalize something, or more importantly, probably is just going to say thank you for some of the things that the people we're meeting with have done in relation to Oregon. And I already kind of mentioned the trade, investment, and cultural exchange. It's pretty broad. Next slide, please. So the missions that we held last year were in large part a repeat of what we had done in 2019 intentionally, because we had been out of circulation through the course of the pandemic. We were looking to reconnect with people, basically walking in and saying, hi, we've been gone for a long time. We're still here. We appreciate you. We're back. So in the first round, we went to visit Korea and Japan. We took with us the Blueberry and Raspberry Commissions, the Wine Board, and then the OSU sensory program also came with us and had several meetings. A part of these is going to be what we have in this picture here, a visit to a retail area where we can kind of see what is in the market. We usually have people with us who are the distributors who can explain who we're up against, what the timeframes are, what the pricing looks like. Representatives from the retailers who can tell us a bit more about what their constraints are and if they've seen anything of concern related to the availability, pricing, quality, et cetera, of Oregon products. So this is a really important visit for us to do to understand the market, but more importantly, to understand what the needs are of our customers. Because most of these are going to be customers that are looking for Oregon product because they recognize the quality, even though we often are at a premium. And they're going to be, especially in Northeast Asia, the culture is to be consistent, and they're looking for someone that they can have as a long-term partner. Our being in the market frequently to touch base with them and hear what they need is essential, because they will not say anything otherwise, just because it would be rude. But at some point, it'll come to a breaking point, and then it's too late. So being on top of it is really key for us as the marketing team, but also for all of the companies that we work with as we're maintaining those relationships overseas. We always go back to our number. 80% of what we grow in the state leaves Oregon, and about half of that, so 40%, is exported. It's essential for us to have those outlets overseas so that we're not inundating markets otherwise in the United States and depressing prices. Next slide, please. So one of the primary objectives of our trip to Korea was to follow up with the government on conditions for IQF blackberries and raspberries. This is a little bit of an oddity, but those government-to-government meetings are not something that we get to do very often. Having been a little bit on the other side, without that constant personal touch, something can languish in an inbox somewhere. So our coming through from time to time in person, letting them know that it's important to us, can light a fire underneath and get that thing moving again. We've had this request with Korea for a while, and understandably through the pandemic, there were other priorities. So this was our opportunity to be there to visit the office that's working on it. Jonathan and I traveled down to the ministry enclave that they've built well outside of Seoul, and met with the officials and carried some of the messages that we have from the federal side, from our regulators here in the state. And we'll have to be following up with them more to make sure that continues to move, but nothing does that better than being there in person to show that it's important. Of course, we're there to support all the delegation efforts. As much as we organize various meeting stops for the people who accompany us, they already have relationships in the market. And so we develop our schedules such that there are common events that we do together, and then there's time for them to go out and do what they need to do on their own, touching base with their own distributors, meeting with their own customers, and often their friends. In Korea in particular, we made a visit, and we try to find somebody who's a strong relationship, somebody that has something recent that's happened in Oregon for the governor to stop by and visit and say thank you for. And in this case, we went by to see Shinsegae, which is maybe Korea's largest retailer. They're the owner of E-Mart, which is the largest grocery outlet in Korea, and they have in 2017 or 2019 bought New Seasons Foods in Oregon, in the Northwest. And they've made investments there. They also have Shinsegae Foods, which is a food manufacturing facility in Salem, and they've made recent investments to expand that facility in recent years. So we were going through to meet with them at a fairly high level and say thank you for your investments in Oregon, for the continued relationship, and there's opportunities there for greater exchange. Carla? We only spent a few days in each market, but we did a transition to Japan as the second leg of the governor's mission. Lost a little bit of the people in the way. It's a long period of time for people to be away. And so we had with us the Blueberry Commission, 2 blueberry companies, Oregon Raspberry Blackberry Commission, 2 of their companies, the Wine Board. Raspberry Blackberry Commission had to drop off for the Japan part because they had funding for Korea only, but the companies came with us. Photoed here is a stop that we made in Toyama, which is Oregon's sister state in Japan, and we've had this relationship for 30 years. In 2020 or 2021 during the pandemic, we weren't able to do the 30-year anniversary celebration, but they did come to visit in 2022 in the summer to celebrate maybe a year later. So this was a reciprocal visit, and this was Governor Brown's first visit to Toyama. So it was also her last opportunity. So we didn't want to be the first administration since the relationship was created to not visit Toyama during their tenure. Located within Toyama is this company, Hokusei, which is a leading aluminum manufacturer and distributor who has also diversified into other products, and they have a strong distribution system. During the 2019 mission with Governor Brown, we were able to connect Oregon Berry Products, make sure I have that name right, with Hokusei as their distributor in the market. And this is a puree product that is interesting enough being used in beer manufacturing, as adding berry flavors to beers. And it's become a pretty good business for them. And Hokusei has been the partner to help us distribute that around Japan. So we made a visit by to see them, and did some tours of the area. It's an interesting town. It's on the east side, or sorry, the west side of Japan, the Sea of Japan. There's a lot of commonality between Oregon and Toyama. Mountain range, coastal, a lot of agriculture, fisheries. Unfortunately, it's hard to figure out how we maintain that relationship on the agricultural side when it's more about collaboration of lessons learned. How do you guys deal with this, rather than being a distribution point? They're not a large population center, so I was exploring while we were there with Brian Ostland from the Seed Commission if there wasn't maybe a way that we could capitalize on that relationship in getting more of Oregon grass seed moved into our the Japanese schoolyards, which generally are not covered. And that was something that maybe Toyama would be willing to help us to pursue that we wouldn't likely be able to pursue, say, with Tokyo or somebody who doesn't have that relationship with us. So looking for ways that we can take the relationships that we already have in some of these places and how they can help us. We've had strong seed sales in Japan for a very long time, largely to golf courses and some other uses for ground cover from construction and other places. But that's died down a little bit over time. They've kind of had economic malaise, and some of the golf courses have closed, and they're not keeping up with it as much as they used to. So schoolyards would be something that would be really new, and Toyama is potentially a place where we can explore that. Next picture, please. Or next slide, I suppose. Doesn't come out very well, but up at the top there you have a giant Godzilla head coming over the building, which just kind of made for a fun stop. I've fallen behind on my own. So something else that we're able to do while we're there is just kind of follow up again on if you aren't on top of the problems or addressing the needs of your consumers early, the problems build to a point where you're no longer able to address them. And prior to our visit and through the pandemic, we had a number of challenges with containers being unavailable, with vessels being delayed, our products not reaching market when it was contracted or required. All of it really is subject to the conditions of the world market. But our being there to talk about it with them, to hear them through, see if there wasn't anything that we could do to maybe ship something sooner, we felt was something that was demonstrating our ability, or at least our concern for their needs and being responsive to it. And then, yeah, reciprocating to the Toyama sister relationship. Oh, and I didn't include the picture in here, but our portions of governor's missions tend to be what I would imagine is the most fun for everyone involved, including the governor. And it's always fun when you get to take the wine board with you, because who doesn't enjoy a wine promotion event? So we did get to make a visit to, I'm not going to try to pronounce that name, you speak Japanese, but that's a difficult name. But they carry 10 brands or 10 labels of Oregon wine in one place. And stopping by and standing around and holding up bottles, and of course everyone's sampling wine in a busy schedule for the governor, where she's going from government meeting to high-level visit to someplace else. When we get to make a 20-minute or 30-minute stop in amidst those, where she gets to laugh and take pictures with bottles of wine, it's something that we bring that I don't think anyone else gets to these missions. And they always make for good headlines in the newspapers. We always have it as a media event, a good place for her to make comments that are I guess more light and fun than maybe what you would say when you're meeting with a high-level government official. So it's something that agriculture gets to bring. Next slide, please. We were able to cram in a third mission last year, and this one focused on Vietnam. Vietnam, in part because the governor was there to sign an MOU that we had been working on with Vietnam, that is a government-to-government collaboration on building greater relationships. And that's been important for agriculture because we may be just about right where the wave is in Japan, where it's hitting the place for being more appropriate for more of Oregon's products. Japan, Korea, and Taiwan have been strong markets for us for a long time. They have an affluent population that's looking for the kind of quality, and they can pay the price that Oregon has for their products. Vietnam has definitely reached that point. The development of the market over the course of time that our staff has been visiting in the last 15 years has been noticeably different each time we go, and usually that's just a few years in between. The grocery stores that I've seen in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh look like if I were in Korea or Japan now. Some of the developments there are just amazing, and it's been a continual growth in the economy and in their consumer demand for over 20 years. So as much as we want to revisit Japan, Korea, and Taiwan regularly, like annually, Vietnam is now on our list as being one of those places that we need to be getting back to. And so having this MOU, having these trips to Vietnam and working on the relationships there is really where our horizon, what we're looking for in the next few years, next 5 years, that's where our priorities are going to be. I guess I already have listed on this screen about the 2023 guest of honor. So one of the visits that we did while we were at in Ho Chi Minh was to visit the 2022 Vietnam Food Expo, and this is a large trade show that's put on by the government of Vietnam. It's traditionally very business to consumer in that they're trying to sell Vietnamese products to consumers within Vietnam. But in the last number of years, they've been building it up more as an international trade show. Not yet one that the USDA recognizes as one of the priority trade shows that they fund, but it may get there. We volunteered to be the next in what they've been doing as a guest of honor to try to build up that international exposure. So in conjunction with the signing of the MOU, the governor was able to be at the show to kind of talk about that building relationship and how we would be coming back in 2023 as the guest of honor. And so we will have a pavilion, about 8 booths. We're going to take a few companies with us and have a number of other products of companies that aren't going to be able to be there, but we will represent for them within this pavilion. And we'll have an Oregon pavilion, and the show fits our needs because more than doing the business to business meetings, this is an opportunity for us to put Oregon on the map. And when I was there with the Blueberry Commission in 2019, after we got our first fresh blueberries into the market, I was talking with a woman who has an outlet or a chain of smoothie stores, and she was talking about all the different types of fruits that she used, and I was asking her if she was familiar with blackberries, and she said, I kind of know about them, but I'm not, we haven't used them. And then I explained Marionberry, and she asked, now where is Oregon? I said, well, we're north of California. She said, isn't that Canada? So this is going to be that opportunity for us to get an exposure of this is who Oregon is. These are the types of products we have, the type of lifestyle we have, because food and lifestyle go close together. And as the guest of honor, we're going to have a lot more of that exposure than we would usually have at a trade show, that we get televised and advertised material for Oregon. It really fits where we are now in the entry to the market. Is kind of setting the stage for more engagement and letting everyone know who we are. Here you can see that we have at the grocery store that we went to. We took the governor for a grocery store visit, and usually we want to be there in, say, July, because that's when more of our summer products are on the market. We're in mid-November, I think it was, for this mission, but we had apples and pears in the market at the time, which was nice. We don't always see fresh produce in Oregon outside of the summer. Next slide. Unfortunately, I think I trimmed too much on the right over there. There's a large pear mascot that is from the U.S. Pears, which is based in Portland, that we had there. The gentleman standing next to the green pear on the right there, that's Francis Lee, who represents Washington State pears and pretty much everything that happens in Vietnam. The picture on the left is a visit that we made with the governor, and the woman behind her there is Amy Nguyen. She has a company, Dragonberry Produce in Canby, and she has selected a couple of different varieties of apples and pears, and she's growing that line of product that she sends to Vietnam, that she markets there. And in this case, it's marketing through a company that does, I think, about 40 outlets around Ho Chi Minh, and they're the size of this table. But they have a facility away where they hold as a warehouse all the product, and on demand they will compile a gift box of high value quality various fruits, and then they're very nicely done in presentation, and then they deliver them here for pickup. And so they literally rolled out a huge red carpet for us, had a whole bunch of media there, had all their product out for us to sample. Again, that's the kind of attention that we like to be able to generate for Oregon agriculture while we have the governor with us. Next slide. And these were a couple of pictures from Amy's distributor in Vietnam that I thought highlighted part of why Vietnam is going to be part of our priorities going forward. Is that in a lot of the other markets we've been in, they're kind of on that same climate landscape that we have, so they're producing a lot of the same products. Our cherries compete with Japanese cherries, our blueberries compete with Korean blueberries. We don't have that competition in Vietnam. They're producing tropical fruit, dragon fruit or pomelo or lychee. They don't have what we have. And Amy in particular is an importer and an exporter. So she's importing these products from Vietnam. She's also taking Oregon product and she's taking them to Vietnam. She's even expanding into hazelnuts, value-added hazelnuts that she'll be taking with us this year as a new product to introduce into Vietnam at the Vietnam Expo. This kind of wraps up the governor's mission part, and I've been talking nonstop for a long time, so I should probably see if there's anything anyone wants to ask about governor's missions before we move on to the next part.
Of course. Just a quick question. 40% export, you said before, out of non-domestic or out of state export. I was trying to.
So 80% leaves Oregon, about 40% of our production stays within the United States, and then about 40% leaves.
Is international. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Those are not numbers that are easy to nail down, so it's a ballpark figure that we have relied on for quite a while, but it seems as we look into it to have stayed consistent over time. Yeah. Well, we produce a lot of potatoes, for example, and we only have 4 million people in the state. So I haven't done the numbers yet on just how much each of us would have to eat if we were to consume everything that we grow in Oregon of the things that we grow. And yeah, that's why the export markets are so important to us. So
just as kind of a future meeting agenda item, it would be kind of interesting to have a panel of exporters of Oregon products. Maybe some of these folks that you guys have had on some of your trade missions.
I was hoping we'd have Ellie here, but
We'll actually meet one of them right after lunch.
She was featured in. I selected a few photos with her in particular because she was with us on the mission in Korea and Japan, and yeah, I put them up there just to put her on the spot if she were here.
She'll be
here a little later. Yeah.
I've seen that off the parkway. That I don't want to butcher the name, but Korean. I just tried to look up what they do, and I can't understand the website. So, but it'd be interesting to learn more about some of these companies. I've gone through Dragonberry. It's got like a big campus there in Andy. I have no idea what they were doing.
Yeah, they're expanding too. We Director Taylor went during the pandemic to participate in the groundbreaking of their second facility. They have an older building, now they have a newer building for their warehousing and distribution. And they're, I mean, she's hired the same person who designed the Oregon garden, the Oregon Japanese garden.
I was going to say the garden, the landscaping is what popped out to me.
And I've been there a few times with the visitors as she's explained what they're doing, but it's not they're done. This is the first part, and then it evolves over time as plants grow and incorporate the next phase, and they already have that kind of planned out. And yeah, she doesn't do anything part way. She's pretty remarkable. All right, then moving on to the next slide. So now the resources that we have available to us are the trade missions that are organized by USDA. We call them agricultural trade missions, or ATMs for short. These are generally missions that they put together in very emerging markets, places that you probably wouldn't visit on your own. And with their organization and kind of taking care of everything for you, it becomes a place that you can go to explore to learn more about. It's usually a very new place. In the last number of years, since the last administration, they've really kind of turned that on its head, and they focused on a lot of the more developed places. And so we had the first ever ATM to Japan in 2018 when I was there, and Director Taylor took part in that mission. So this year, just as a highlight, we sent Director, or at the time, Ron, were you director, acting director, deputy director at the time? You've worn so many hats in such a short period of time.
I can't hear your question.
When you went to London, what was your title at the time?
I have to remember, I was the deputy director.
Okay. So we sent Deputy Director Henderson and Tracy Oshoka to the UK in June. And since then, they've had the Philippines, which is a market that's also kind of on that maybe slightly over the horizon, but one that we've been working on over a long period of time to build relationships in. We have a market access request for our fresh blueberries that has kind of been in parallel with our work that was in Vietnam. Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, all being places that they didn't typically hold an ATM in the past. But we usually hold about half a dozen of them a year, and it's something that is possible for us to have a lot of our travel funded for by USDA. So it's an opportunity for us to take it out and see parts of the world that we don't always see. Next slide, please. Couldn't resist throwing this up because just last week, USDA went back to Japan after the mission that they had the first time there in 2018. And former Director Taylor, as the new Undersecretary, was the head of the delegation to lead that delegation this year. I got this, actually, Amy Nguyen from Dragonberry was there with her. She sent this to me by text on Sunday night when the mission started Monday morning their time, just saying, all right, Alexis is here. This is so exciting. Next slide, please. So the London ATM was held in late June. We had former Deputy Secretary Brownell that was the head of the delegation. We had 12 states that participated, as well as 11 cooperators, of which WUSADA, which we're a member of the Western U.S. Ag Trade Association, was one. And just a whole slew of commodities and products that are represented among the people who participated in that mission. Next slide, please. You don't move mine. So the UK was not something that I had initially, when I came to ODA, thought of as one of our markets that we'd be looking at. We focus to Asia. They're across the ocean from us. We have a competitive advantage by our proximity. Europe, on the other hand, is the east coast of the United States. That it's kind of their backyard. But during the pandemic, British Airways opened a direct flight from Portland to London. And there are a number of commodities that, because of either that air flight or because it's non-perishable, it's say a frozen seafood, or it's a wine or something else that's shelf stable, they can take their time to get there and they can be competitive. So following, USDA set up this mission largely because of Brexit and the opportunities of the UK no longer being under some of the European rules that have been difficult, and the possibility of an FTA, specifically with the United States, that could create new opportunities for us, and just kind of doing a reset and looking for new opportunities. So we were excited to be able to participate in this mission and go to see what those look like and make sure that our name is among those that people are seeing as being active in the market. You'll see by the participants that we had with us, the wine board and two of our seafood companies, our packers, that we've been doing a lot of follow-up with those in that and then since. Next slide, please. One of the areas we've actually been pretty active in the last few months, and since this was to kind of flag that since Brexit, our pink shrimp, which is a bit of a different variety. There's 3 main varieties of shrimp around the world, and one of them is along the west coast here, of which Oregon and Washington is where most of it is caught. Used to get into the UK as part of a quota that was set up in all of the EU. After Brexit, we were no longer part of that quota system, or at least the UK is no longer part of that quota system, and so any product that we're sending is subject to a 20% tariff, which really eliminates us from being competitive within the market. So we've sent a letter to the UK. We've had a lot of outreach. Just had a whole bunch of buyers here in Oregon during the month of May, working on building a consensus for asking the UK government more so to either eliminate that tariff or to give us a quota like what we had prior to their leaving the EU. So we're going to continue working on that. Wine, it's their 3rd largest market. I think it's my impression is that the Brits like good wine, but they're not quite as married to French wine as the rest of Europe is. Might be a little history there that does that. So our Pinot Noir comes up unsolicited pretty much everywhere we go. We were on a trade mission like this back in 2019, and we sent one of our trade managers, and he's sitting in the back of the room, the lowest ranked person in the room, and the Canadian Minister of Trade just says, "Oh, don't we have someone here who's representing Pinot Noir?" And everyone kind of turns their head, and there's Eric in the back of the room. "Yeah, that's us. We love your Pinot Noir. We need to get more of that." So it's a bit of an envy. We get a little bit of jealousy from everyone else, the attention that we get, again, from the quality of our products. But yeah, well, wine is not difficult to sell. It's one of those things that's we're kind of in the non-Goldilocks zone where we're really high quality. We win lots of awards. I mean, well beyond our size. But we're not as well known, and so we're kind of at that expensive place where somebody would probably pay a bit more for something that's better known, but we're not competitive with those that are significantly less expensive. So we're just kind of in this weird spot where we really have to work on those niche buyers and people who are looking for our product, not just mass sale, because we don't have mass product. We don't have large volumes. Next slide. And yeah, so Deputy Director Henderson was able to visit Parliament, listen to what would be his counterpart being grilled by Parliament, answering questions. Glad that he wasn't subject to a similar type of grilling up in front of the legislature. And yeah, representing Oregon at that higher level while he was in the UK. I'm going to kind of come back on some follow-up we've had to our mission here, but maybe moving on to the second of the ATMs that we did. It's just one slide. And that's USDA put together a mission to East Africa, to Kenya and Tanzania. And you pretty much can't get any further from Oregon than this. This is not something that we've looked at because of that. Most of our products are perishable. They're not going to make it that far. The markets are a lot less developed. But we've had some encouragement from members of the legislature to look at this part of the world as growing and as a new opportunity. So we sent one of our staff to participate, and particularly, again, looking at seafood because it's frozen and non-perishable, looking at possibilities for cover crop and grass seed. A lot of the business that's going on there has to do with the resorts and hotels, and so their really cost isn't a concern. It's more about ability to deliver and, of course, the terms of it. So there are some opportunities for, especially our wine, but a lot of even our frozen fruits, we're competing with a lot of other suppliers that are coming from a lot closer, like South Africa. So we're kind of interested to see if that was something that we might be able to break in with, especially with some of our IQF and frozen fruits. But doesn't look as useful as likely. It's probably wine. Seafood does a bit in Western Africa, so getting Eastern Africa is still probably something very different. It's a very big place. So we'll continue following up on that, but it was an initial look at a part of the world that's just well beyond what we'd been considering before, and became an opportunity because it was organized by USDA. And next slide takes us into the next type of activity that we do, which is outbounds. The next two are outbounds and inbounds, and these are largely activities that we do through collaboration with other states as part of that Western U.S. Association of Trade Associations, WUSADA. Outbounds are probably actually should have flipped these and had inbounds first. We often have the inbound come in so that people are able to, the buyers are able to meet a lot of different types of Oregon products at once. The outbound is then to follow up on the inbound with going over for the person who's going to be exporting to understand the market. So as we say, they're building the connections for Oregon's food. A lot of that connection being the relationships and just general understanding the market. Next slide, please. So we do about a dozen outbound missions every year. We always focus a couple of those on Korea and Japan because those are our longstanding markets. They're the ones that are traditionally the best fit for Oregon products. We will take, through WUSADA, we organize the trips with partners, and it's open to all the companies of the Western states. And so usually we'll have a couple of Oregon companies with us. It's not purely an Oregon delegation that's going. But some of them we also organize outside of WUSADA. And one of those activities for a long time has been the Hood to Fuji and Fuji to Hood exchange. It takes place every other year. We just had it in the last month or two. And these are hops and Oregon berry products that puree again, and some of our other grains that are ingredients in, and travel to Japan on the Hood to Fuji portion to collaborate with brewers in Japan to make a couple of different beers using Oregon ingredients. And then next year we'll do the Fuji to Hood portion, where those people who use Oregon products come to Oregon. They get to do tours of where the hops are grown, and they get to see what's happening with our beer culture. And then they also do a little competition of brewing in partnership, Americans and Japanese together, to make more products while they're here. And we go back and forth every year to do that kind of activity and just build on the relationships and the sales that generate as a result. This year we also took with us, long delayed, the Potato Commission to Japan, and we've had some funding that we were able to pursue through Specialty Crop Block Grant for them to go to FoodX. Obviously it was delayed multiple years because of the pandemic, but Japan is the largest market for our fresh potatoes, even if they are essentially banned because of a nematode. There has been the largest potato chip manufacturer in Japan, Calbee, is the sole purchaser of Oregon, and Oregon's one of a dozen states that export potatoes, but it's solid, it's consistent, it's growing, and the pressure in Japan for demand for more potatoes has outstripped the production of potatoes, which actually declined. And so this has been a good time for us to visit, as the Japanese government has recently made a few changes to the rules on getting potatoes into the market, which we've been pursuing for 30 years. So it used to be that we could only get them into the market from the end of June until the beginning of February, which is after their product has all been sold out of the market, and then they'll allow ours in. Now we can sell all year round, and we're continuing to push for different types of potatoes, different types of use, and a greater access into the market, which I go into this really too much, and I'm not going to. But it was a really good time for us to be in the market and meeting with Calbee, meeting with other people who would be using potatoes, and meeting with the government to continue to remind them that this is something that we need. You don't grow enough of it. In fact, the production is going down every year. So we would like to continue to press for the expanded market access. Next slide, please. Sometimes as part of our trade missions, other times just cold calls. We get leads. We get somebody who's looking for something that had a call a couple of years ago from Malaysia saying, we're looking to purchase sheep and we need to figure out how to vet the growers or the ranchers that are raising the sheep and make sure that they meet the various standards that we have, and how can you help us? Something out of the blue, something we don't plan for, but becomes an opportunity by virtue of somebody having some knowledge of Oregon, hopefully coming out of our various engagements with those countries. So listed on this slide are just a number of places where we've fielded questions directly from the demand overseas from the importer, or they've reached out to somebody in the western states or the USDA or somewhere, and they've said, oh, Oregon knows about that, or Oregon has that, and they send it to us. And these are just pretty constant and not part of our planning, and just add extra work, but often wind up being something that is really fruitful because it's somebody who's already looking for the product. It's a matter of us pairing them with the right person, and it's never as easy as they're looking for blueberries and we have blueberries. It's what they're looking for, how much they're looking for, the time frame. Those are all the types of things that our trade managers are able to kind of coach both the importer and the exporter through to make sure that it's a match, or maybe vet the importer to make sure what they're looking for, and then find the right exporter who's a good pair for them. So part of the work that our team does that doesn't usually get spoken about. It's not as glamorous as the imports and the exports, or the inbounds and the outbounds. Next slide. So this is the one that I was excited to talk about, following up on Lauren and Teresa's travel to the UK as part of that trade mission. We've done 2 programs overseas since then to follow up on it. One was sending Eric Garman is featured here in both these pictures. He's our North American person, but he also works very closely with all of our seafood commissions and industry members. So he traveled to London again in November to do a promotion of a number of different species, including Dover sole and hake and Oregon pink shrimp. And in that promotion in particular, they were looking at the use of Dover sole as a replacement for cod, as a less expensive option for restaurants that were maybe not able to find the cod or couldn't afford it anymore, and see if consumers would notice the difference or maybe be turned off by it. And quite to the contrary, about 68% said they didn't notice the difference or actually liked it better. And so it's generated quite a bit of media attention. And if we can just go to the next slide, please, real quick, because I kind of jumped the gun on that one. Here's just a couple of the articles that have come out in the UK talking about would U.S. fish, would Pacific whiting, would some of these others be the savior of the staple of British cuisine, the fish and chip, because of the difficulty of getting the cod that's usually used or the higher costs related to it. Carl, can we go to the previous slide that we just left? The second activity we did was to go to the largest seafood show in Barcelona. It was held in April this year. And between those 2, we were able to finalize a schedule that brought about 8 buyers. The biggest, most influential buyers that we could find are actually just the biggest that there are in the UK for seafood to Oregon in May. That was just last month. And so this was up on the rooftop of the Noble Rot in downtown, east side of downtown Portland, at the end of a really unique week. It was like summer weather, perfect. They did not get the Oregon experience that you would normally get in May. But we took them, Eric chauffeured them to, a bunch of the different fish packing houses and showed them all around Oregon. They got the full story of what we've done to maintain our fisheries, how, I don't know if you're familiar, but Oregon is MSC certified. Our fisheries, almost all of them, it's Marine Stewardship Council certification. It's fairly expensive and it's intensive, but it's been part of the strategy that our fisheries have taken to promote themselves as being sustainable and desirable. We're going through all these efforts to maintain our fishery as it is, so we might as well have something to show for it. And Oregon pink shrimp was actually the first shrimp in the world to be MSC certified, which is something that we've been featuring in our letter to the UK front and center. Just, this is something that's important to your consumers. It's something that you say that you want. Let's walk that talk and make sure that Oregon shrimp is getting the market access that reflects the investments we're making in something that you think are important. But this group was maybe stunned. I mean, they were raving. This was the first I went into this dinner with them that night where they had all these samples that were organized by the chef who's standing next to Eric, just to show all the different things that can be done, or at least some of the things that can be done with Oregon fish. And really excited about the momentum that this has generated, and already planning for the Barcelona show for next year and for additional engagements in the UK, but also expanding. We'll be going in November to the Netherlands to take some of that same kind of promotional work into Northern Europe. And this has all been funded through some additional funds that came out of our conflict with China that is encouraging us to look at markets that were hurt because of the tariff conflict in China. And Northern Europe has been a place that we've had a presence, and this is funding that we can use to try to increase that presence and increase those sales. And yeah, really excited what we've been able to make happen in the time since the world's kind of reopened from the pandemic and we've been able to travel again. We go 2 slides. Before starting trade shows, do you want to have me take a break from talking and see if there's anything that anyone wants to say before like wrapping up towards the end of what we have? It's a lot and I'm talking too much, but trade shows is something that we can do either overseas or in the United States because they attract buyers from overseas, even if it's held in the United States. It's also something that we can do for our export. It's something that we can do more locally. And featured in this slide is the night market, I think it's called, down on the east side of Portland, right next to the railroad tracks under the Morrison Bridge. Nice big open, very Portland vibe kind of industrial warehouse facility, multiple rooms. And this is something that we've coordinated with the Good Food Foundation, which is a group of retailers who have developed a standard for the types of products that they want to carry in their stores. These are retailers like Market of Choice and similar across the United States. And we were able to bring Good Food Foundation's Mercantile to Portland last year as the first of a recurring show. We had the second just last month, or in April now, 2 months ago. So nice big venue, about 200 vendors in the show, a lot of them from Oregon, but bringing in buyers from all over the United States, the people who are looking at what's going to be placed on the shelves in stores like New Seasons or Market of Choice or something at that higher price level, but really is a good fit for a lot of the value add manufacturers that we have in Oregon. Listed on the side, there are some of the other shows that we've been participating in recently, and these are ones that we've participated in for a long time, but we've used some of that money that we had from our rent savings when we left the FIC to put into a greater presence for Oregon, having Oregon pavilions at the Fancy Food Show and at Cial America, and having another one coming up next month, or this month now, at Fancy Food out in the East Coast in New York. So really trying to build up, rather than having all these companies being located here and there, having people walking through and be like, oh, all of these are from Oregon, and having an identified, maybe not quite a brand, but all together, where people are able to see the diversity of what we have. And in doing so, we're able to reduce the costs for those who are going to these shows, because a lot of them are under pressure, and it's been a big help for a lot of our value add producers, all of those using product that's grown here in Oregon. And then, of course, listed on the bottom of that list is our participation in the Vietnam Food Expo in November at the end of the year. Next slide has just a nice, fun show of some of the products that are on display. A lot of these are products that are developed at OSU's Food Innovation Center. And then you'll see a ribbon and metal around some of the jars up in the upper right. I think most of these are Good Food Award winners. So they have a competition every year in different categories, and Oregon actually has a large representation in those awards. And we're looking forward to having that relationship continue going into the future. Next picture is more of the events that we do around. We hosted a dinner with Prosper Portland, who was a part of it last year. And so these are all the buyers that are involved, and we bring them together. We thank them for coming. We talk about our products. Portland talks about how wonderful it is to have people visiting Portland again. It's a way the night before the show, to open it up. And so these are just some of the other values that we add to trying to make the event more enjoyable for those that are coming in, making the impression that we want to on the buyers, making it worth something that they're going to want to come back to year after year. Realizing that I'm probably running over. Next slide is a demonstration of how we're trying to do work for our non-food side of agriculture as well. So this is the No-Till Conference out. See, it was in St. Louis this year. It was in Louisville last year. And so we've been sending Gary out with a table with some of our seed commission members, with little dishes of all the different types of cover crop seed and other grass seed that we have, and talking with the farmers. They come through and asking about how those would be useful in their climate or in their part of the country, or what are the benefits of using them, whether it's breaking up deadpan or the root system increasing water retention. And this is something that we found is a pretty low-hanging fruit for us to participate in, to sponsor, and to travel for. Those little silver dishes we've used in both years, and the intent was, if you put them out there, we bet farmers will not be able to resist sticking their fingers in there and picking them up and feeling what the seed feels like. And I went last year, I didn't go this year, but sure enough, just about everyone who walks by did exactly that. Sticking their fingers in and feeling what each of those seeds feels like, and asking. You can be sitting at a table with all sorts of information, and people will just look and walk by and not engage with you, but that has worked. It's just almost everyone will stop and ask questions, and it's a way of making it more worthwhile traveling out for this kind of show. That's easily a room of 1,000 farmers from the Midwest, and that's the target that we're trying to reach, are the farmers that we would like to be including our clover or our radish or vetch or something in their cover crop spread, rather than just the ryegrass that they can find from a farmer down the road. Ours is more expensive, but you only use a smaller amount of it, and it has a much larger benefit than that small cost. Otherwise, the sticker shock usually turns them off. Last part of the presentation is the inbounds. I couldn't resist using this picture. This was a group that we had from Malaysia just in February, and they had mentioned when they were here that they had never seen snow. So for this regulator, this was her first time having snow. They had a snowball fight up on the West Hills above Portland on their way down into our meetings. So it's not always trade. Sometimes you get to do a bit more than that. But inbound missions, next slide please, is an opportunity for us to take buyers to see more than just the product itself, to see where it's made, to see how we grow it, to talk with them about all of what goes into the production of the food that makes ours reliable, that makes it the product that they're looking for. There's just something about being where the food comes from that is as much of the selling point as anything else. And last slide is building on momentum, a couple of attractive pictures of some of the promotional activities we've done. Just kind of looking into the future, and maybe just I've saved into the last. The other one that I didn't mention, which is something that we do, is the director's mission, or an ODA-led mission. We've been planning on going to Singapore and Taiwan since 2020, and we've just announced it in the last week and are now recruiting companies to go to both those markets. As much as Vietnam is that on the horizon where we want to be getting to, Singapore and Taiwan are places that we've already been, but we need to be doing more. So that's kind of our immediate priority. Both of those are also transshipment locations for product to get to places like Vietnam. So while we're in those markets, we'll be looking at what can be done to improve the shipping options for our product to get to markets like Vietnam or Philippines or Thailand as we increase our reach into Southeast Asia. And then from there, it gets just into the questions because I have talked for a very long time.
Thank you, Jess. I don't know, we have questions from the members of the board. And please don't forget to say your name when you're going to talk for the records. Any question? No? Eric, are you okay?
Overwhelmed.
Yeah, we're processing the information.
If I could, Chair, Lauren Henderson, Acting Director. Yeah, it's a lot of information. We'll come back as often as we need to on this subject. It's a very important subject. I will just say this. Most of what we do relies on other people's money. We do not have a lot of state dollars inside of ODA other than the staff salaries. And so we do a lot with a little, but are also very dependent on others and some federal dollars to do that. We will, I think, in our next budget period, continue to work on what I'm going to call ODA internal infrastructure. This is one of those areas. My visit to the UK was very interesting. I never thought I would get to go to Parliament, but one thing I found there was how much in common we actually have in the ag space. And although Parliament was run very differently, the issues that the ag director was talking about, I could have said, and very, very similar to some things. So I think there's opportunities in places like that, but you can't do anything about that if you're not there. And so we need to be there, need to be more often, but we do have to do that with the monies that come available. So you'll hear more about that, I think, in the future.
I'll just chime in. I thought that was a fascinating, Elon Miller, sorry for the record. Thank you, Chair. Fascinating presentation, and I hadn't realized the depth and breadth and the work with USDA that you're doing, and I see more opportunities that we could be looking at beyond. So thank you.
All right.
Sure.
So thank you, Jess, once again. And yeah, it's amazing all the work that you're doing to connect with the world. That is great. So I want to remind you, if there is someone here in the want to sign for the public comment. I don't know, Carla.
We don't have any.
We don't have any. All right. That was our next item in our agenda, but if we don't have, we have now time for a break. I think, well, suppose we had 15 minutes, but I think we can come back at 10:30. Is that okay? Yep. Okay, so we will come back again at 10:30.
Yeah, if I could, just before you leave, I have one of our wonderful staff in the back that walked in. Michael, can you stand up? This is Michael. Please say hi to Michael. He's not bashful. And he's one of our valued hemp team members, and this territory is his down here in Southern Oregon. And so I wanted to make sure that if he was able to, and his workload, that he was able to stop by and experience a Board of Ag. So Michael, thank you for coming.
Okay. So we will join again at 10:30. Thank you. Oh, okay. Oh, well, wait. I thought she was around. Sorry, we missed one member, so we're going to wait one more minute for her. I didn't notice that she left. She's coming. Okay, we're going to continue with our meeting today. This is Luisa Santamaria for the record. The next item in our agenda is the organic industry update. So I'm going to call Chris Schreiner, Executive Director of Oregon Till. Thank you to be here.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to the Board of Agriculture today and creating some time on your agenda. Again, I'm Chris Schreiner. I'm the Executive Director for Oregon Health, and I conferred with Interim Director Henderson, or Lauren, as he prefers, about the agenda today, and we what I'm hoping to cover, well, what I plan to cover is not only an update, but I'll start with some basics of organic certification and then talk about some market updates, both at the national and state levels. I'll spend some time also talking about some innovative partnerships that Oregon Tilth has cultivated around organic agriculture with traditional ag service providers, and then share some info on some recent federal initiatives to support organic and the results of a recently published organic market assessment for Oregon. And I will be saving time for questions at the end. So, Carla, do you have the presentation up?
Chris,
Yeah.
you might just move your mic just a little closer.
Closer. All right. There we go. And I'll try to project a little more too. So Carla, thank you for driving the slides. You can go ahead and advance to the next one. So just a little bit about Oregon Tilth. We are a leading nonprofit organic certifier, educator, and advocate. And we have a staff of over 100 now, spread throughout the U.S. I've worked for the organization for 25 years, and I've been the executive director since 2009. So I've seen a lot of growth and change in the organic sector in that period of time. And you can go ahead and advance to the next slide, Carla. While our organizational roots started in the Pacific Northwest and Oregon, as I mentioned today, we have staff and services and an impact that reaches across North America. We have a branch office in Mexico as well, and we, with over 2,200 certified organic clients across the U.S. and Mexico, we're the largest organic certifier here in Oregon, but we're not the only one that does organic certification in Oregon. The Department of Ag is one of the other organic certifiers. And our clients, they range from small direct market farms to international brands that you see in all the big box stores. And collectively, they generate over $6 billion of organic sales annually. And so our certification program is responsible for ensuring the compliance and integrity of that $6 billion of organic sales. That's about 10% of the total organic sales in the country. Go ahead and do the next one. Thank you, Carla. So
Just a little bit about the organic guarantee. There's this growing number of labels in the marketplace designed to highlight certain practices that align with consumer values. I'll name a few that you've probably seen. Humane certified, fair trade, regenerative seems to be an up-and-comer in the eco-label space. But organic is unique, and it's unique because for the past 20 years, it's been the only eco-label in the market that's backed by this combination of third-party inspections, a federal regulation, and it covers all the links in the food supply chain from the farm to the table. And when it comes to organic standards and practices, my experience has been that the organic sector has done a good job of communicating what it excludes or prohibits. When I ask my friends and family, do you know what organic food is? Tell me what you know. I hear a lot of no's. No synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, no growth hormones, no synthetic food additives in the processed foods. And those are important attributes of organic products that consumers do care about and draw consumers to organic, but I also believe that more attention is needed on what we promote and what we support. And if you look at the slide on the screen there, that's what I chose to highlight. Organic practices and standards promote healthy soil. They promote biodiversity and conservation of our natural resources. They promote animal welfare and ultimately, healthy communities. And so I think, when Oregon Tilth shows up and is a representative for the organic sector, we really like to try to frame our conversations more about what we're promoting and what we're supporting. I think that creates some common ground and some space for discussion on the best ways to achieve those goals. Go ahead and do the next slide, Carla. So the USDA organic seal, there are, as I said, these organic regulations. They're voluntary, so farmers, food handlers, and processors choose to opt in and access this market. And what the regulatory framework does is it provides a clear definition and a consistent set of practices and verification process. And so what happens is third-party certifiers like Oregon Tilth are accredited by the USDA's National Organic Program, and we're subject to audits and records review. Just like we go and inspect our farms and processing facilities, the USDA comes and inspects us and the work we do to make sure that when we are saying, yes, this product, this operation meet the standards and the regulations and can use that organic seal, that we've done our due diligence in confirming that compliance. And I would say that, again, certification ensures organic integrity across that whole supply chain. So we're looking at crops and livestock products produced on the farm. We're visiting distributors and wholesalers that are, co-packing and aggregating. And also we're looking at processors of multi-ingredient products that end up on the shelves for consumer products that we buy, anything from soups to salsas to frozen dinners. And I will note that, when there's money involved, and in the organic sector, it is the fastest growing food sector, there's temptation for fraud. And so federal enforcement and those regulations, they provide this provisions for significant fines and even prison sentences for fraudulent violators. And we have seen both fines and people serve prison time when they violate the rules. And that's really important because at the end of the day, this whole market-based system is dependent on consumer trust in that organic label, that when they're paying that extra premium at the checkout stand, that they are getting what they expect. Carla, go ahead. So just briefly, the certification process. The process is more or less the same for all accredited certifiers, and it begins with an organic operation submitting an application that we call an organic system plan. And the system plan describes all aspects of how the products that they're producing, whether, again, crops, livestock products, or multi-ingredient products, meet the applicable organic standards. And then once the operation has completed that organic system plan, it's submitted to the certifier, and it gets an initial review to determine if, one, we have all the information that we need about their practices, and then two, if on paper, what's described shows that this operation is eligible for certification. And so during that initial review, we may ask for additional information or forms to be completed just so we have that complete picture. And then once we do have a complete picture with that system plan, then we proceed to the next step of inspection. So at that stage, we'll have the inspector contact the operation. We'll set up a day and time to visit the operation. And our inspector's job is really to verify that what's described in that organic system plan on paper is an accurate reflection of what's happening in the fields and in the facilities. And the inspector fills out an inspection report, basically describing what they observed and how that aligns with the applicable regulations. The inspectors don't make a final decision on compliance. They share what they see, and they submit that inspection report back to the certifier, as well as a copy that's left with the operation. And then there is what we call the final review, and someone else at the certifier looks at that entire operations file. So they'll look at the organic system plan, the inspection report and observations, and they'll make that final decision on compliance and certification. And if everything checks out, then the operation is granted organic certification. Sometimes they might identify some non-compliances where they haven't met all of the organic standards. Some non-compliances are considered minor. A lot of them involve record keeping, like they didn't have sufficient records. And so we'll just identify that, give the operation a chance to submit a corrective action. And how are you going to fix this? How are you going to come into full compliance? And then once that corrective action is noted and resolved, we'll continue with certification. Other non-compliances can be more significant. So the inspector might have observed a situation that wasn't clear or identified in the OSP, maybe the use of a prohibited input or material that could jeopardize certification and the products. And the other thing to note with the certification process is that that whole cycle that I described, from submitting, an annual system plan and the on-site inspection and the review, that happens every year. That is an annual cycle. And so it's not just a one and done. And that's just our ability to kind of keep up with changes that are happening at the operation and make sure that the operation is fully compliant. So that's a little bit of the Organic 101 piece. I'll transition now, Carla, thank you for going to the next slide, to some market updates. So first slide here is at the national level. Organic food sales in the U.S. in 2022 broke through the $60 billion mark for the first time, hitting another high-level mark for the resilient organic sector. And total organic sales, which include both food sales and non-food products, if you want some examples of non-food organic products, pet foods are in that. There's body care, there's fiber, products as well. And so together, while the food represents about 61 billion, the non-food was about 6 billion. So combined, there was a record $67.6 billion in sales in 2022. And this data comes from a survey that's conducted by the National Organic Trade Association. And I think that's notable that you can see on the chart, the overall trend line of growth is growth. And the organic market grew last year despite some really challenging headwinds, and these are all going to sound familiar across the food and ag sector, but inflation pressures that were tightening consumer wallets, supply chain disruptions, stemming from both a pandemic and global political events like the situation in Ukraine, this proliferation of competing food labels in the grocery aisles, and also labor shortages that were felt acutely by organic farmers. And so all of that combined, it heated up costs across the organic supply chain and really, as I said, indeed, across the entire food supply chain. And it boosted prices in grocery aisles. So as a result of that, the organic sector really did kind of reflect what was happening in the overall food sector, where the value of organic sales are rising, even though in some segments, the actual volume of sales went down a bit. And so we're not unlike the rest of the food system in that way. But, we continue to grow. And I would say that at the national level now, what's organic food reached that 60 billion mark. It now accounts for 6% of total food sales in the U.S. You can go to the next slide, Carla. And just to, drill down a bit more on this slide, this really looks at market penetration by category. So while organic represents 6% of all food sales, in certain categories, we represent a much higher percentage. And, one of the true entry points for organic consumers continues to be fruits and vegetables, which has held kind of the highest place in food category share in organic for quite some time. Fruits and vegetables, organic fruits and vegetables, they represent about just over a third of total organic food sales. So, and their market penetration is nearly 15% of all fruit and vegetables sold in the U.S. The third highest category is dairy and eggs. They were at about $8 billion in 2022. That was a 7% increase. And organic dairy and eggs now constitute close to 8% of total dairy and eggs sold in the U.S. And I called fruits and veg and dairy and eggs out just because here in Oregon, those are two of our key commodities in our specialty crop state. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Carla. And I want to talk about consumers, because really the organic label is a consumer and a market demand driven space. And, the story here is really that today's consumers are increasingly interested in the practices that are used to produce the products that they purchase. And, we've seen historic interest in consumers around their own health and environmental health. I think more recently, there's an increased concern and interest in social justice issues and climate change, and the organic label and the practices that it represents. It speaks to all of those issues. On the social justice side, farmers that are farming organically, they receive premiums for their organic crops and livestock products, and those premiums help improve their profitability and improve their economic viability. And farm workers on organic farms enjoy safer conditions due to reduced exposure to toxic synthetic pesticides. And there's this growing body of scientific peer-reviewed research that's showing how organic practices that foster healthy soil can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase carbon sequestration in the soil. And then on the pie chart on the slide there, you can see kind of the demographics of organic consumers. And this was interesting to me that 14% of dedicated organic consumers identify as Black, 25% as Hispanic, and 10% as Asian. And each of those groups, their organic purchasing exceeded their representation in the overall U.S. population. And so, what this shows is that organic consumers are more diverse than often is expected or characterized. And the other thing about organic consumers is, according to last year's data, 45%, so almost half of the organic customer base are under the age of 40. And so what this tells me is this is the market of the future. These are where the interests and of consumers are headed. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Carla. I want to do a slide of just organic in Oregon and a snapshot across a couple areas. Oregon has been and continues to be a national leader in organic. We last year ranked 10th in the total certified organic operations with almost 900 certified organic businesses across the supply chain in the state. And with farm gate sales of $386 million, that's a 2021 number. That's the most recent data we have from the USDA's National Ag Statistics Service. Oregon's been very competitive in securing federal grant program funding to support organic research and education. There are 2 dedicated programs at the USDA for that purpose. And so far, applicants in Oregon have secured over $18.5 million in grants, federal grants around organic research and education. A lot of that going to OSU, some to other institutions and nonprofits in the state. But we're very competitive in our R&D around organic agriculture and leveraging those federal dollars that way. I'll highlight that, that acreage there is close to 500,000 certified organic acres in Oregon in 2021. And some of the top commodities for our state were milk, blueberries, and hay. You go ahead and go to the next slide, Carla. So now I'm going to shift to partnerships. And, Oregon Tilth, we really know that we can accomplish a lot more when we work together on common goals. And I'm going to highlight 3 of the innovative partnerships that we've cultivated and nurtured over the past, 10 years or so that really demonstrate that collaborative spirit and the outcomes that can occur when we collaborate and when we partner. So the first one I'm highlighting is our partnership with the USDA's Natural Resources and Conservation Service. This is a national partnership that was established in 2010, so it's been 13 years now. And through that partnership, we share the cost of an organic conservation specialist position. And again, this position serves the whole country, and it's housed at the West Tech Center in Portland for NRCS. And through this arrangement and through that position, what happens is Oregon Tilth provides technical assistance and coordination with the goal of really increasing the NRCS's knowledge and skills for serving organic farmers. And we develop trainings in response to state-specific needs, and we coordinate with the state NRCS offices, local extensions in those states, partner organizations in those states, and farmers. And again, looking at the slide, you can kind of see the impact of the outreach and education that we've been doing through this partnership. Just as a for instance, we've given trainings to over 5,000 NRCS staff and other ag professionals in 42 different states to empower them to better serve organic farms, seeking conservation, technical, and financial assistance through Farm Bill programs like EQIP and CSP. And we've done national webinars. We've got, that get recorded, over 16,000 views of those. And we also do outreach to farmers. So we're going to farmer conferences and events to make sure that they know about the opportunity that these federal conservation programs offer for some technical assistance and financial assistance. Ultimately, the goal of this partnership is to just increase access to resources and expertise for organic and transitioning farmers. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll move from a federal agency partnership to a state agency partnership with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. So for some time now, we've been having regular meetings between organic stakeholders and ODA leadership. And this is just an opportunity for us to exchange information, share what's the latest with the sector, identify any needs that are, that the sector is facing, and talk about unique contributions. So that's, just been great to have that connection with the department and think about, how the department, in its role of serving all of Oregon agriculture, can leverage its resources and its different programs and services to support organic producers. Another way that we partner with the ODA is they have been administering the certification cost share program. That's a federal program, but state agencies can sign up to administer it. And Oregon Tilth, appreciates the ODA's doing that, and we offer a lot of outreach and education support to our clients about that program that's really designed to help keep organic certification accessible and affordable for the small to mid-size operations that are getting certified. And then a last example that I wanted to share in terms of the partnership with ODA is how I was provided with the opportunity to serve on the Specialty Crop Block Grant Advisory Committee. I did that for about a decade. And again, that's a federal program that's dollars that go to the state. And at the state level, we identify opportunities to support agriculture and in particular specialty crops, which is, an important part of Oregon agriculture. And for me, that experience was really valuable, and it was an example of the role that the department can play of convening the diverse stakeholders in agriculture that we have here in Oregon and creating spaces for shared work and common goals. And so during that decade that I served on the advisory committee, other advisory committees members who'd been there just as long were representatives from more traditional and conventional food and agriculture stakeholders, folks like Jess Stone from the Oregon Association of Nurseries, and Dave Dillon, who was, at that time with the Farm Bill. Now he's over with, Food Northwest, Pacific Northwest Food Processors Association. But as we worked together on the advisory committee, we got to know each other, and we got to hear each other's perspectives and expertise as we were evaluating the different grant proposals and ranking them to determine which ones got funded. And I think that creating that space and that common work was really valuable because you can build real relationships, credibility, and trust. And when you have differences and disagreements, which will come up with diverse stakeholders in agriculture, if the department can really do good by building some common ground and information across stakeholders. So I just wanted to share that and highlight that experience that I've had and thank the ODA for creating those spaces and encouraging them to keep doing it. The last partnership, next slide, Carla, that I wanted to highlight is our partnership with Oregon State University. Obviously, our land-grant university that has a lot of resources and expertise to support our food and ag sector. And, this is a great partnership that's built on, once again, good relationships where we have a shared understanding of some common goals and our unique strengths. What do we bring to the table that's unique as a nonprofit and as a certifier and educator, and what does OSU have to offer? Through this partnership, we also show up financially. Oregon Tilth has invested over $300,000 in Oregon State University since that partnership began, and that funding has helped protect faculty positions in difficult fiscal years by allowing OSU to leverage some match dollars. And so that's just the basis of that partnership. And just some examples of how we're partnering with OSU. One is around beginning farmer and rancher education. They've developed this Growing Farms curriculum. It's an online class with content that combines text and videos and case studies. There's 6 modules over 5 hours of instruction. And as part of that curriculum, some of the case studies are organic farms. And so we're just identifying that that is a possible pathway for new and beginning farmers to consider. OSU has also developed an organic farming systems certificate program for students through their eCampus. I think this is like a 27 credit certificate, multiple classes. And what I'm hearing from faculty at OSU is a lot of the newer, younger students coming in are interested in sustainability and organic courses and coursework. And so that's just another space where we're helping to build that workforce pipeline in the future and respond to the interests of the next generation of students and farmers. We also focus on farm profitability and viability. Really, this is recognizing that to be a successful farm, you not only need to be able to be a great agriculturalist and horticulturalist. I can be the best carrot grower in the state, but if I don't know how much it costs me to produce those carrots and what I need to be pricing them at, I might not be growing carrots for that long. And so through this work, we offer some online and face-to-face education to farmers on managerial accounting. We've developed cost calculator tools to give farmers information about which profitable crops they have might be scaled up, and also, help them identify some of those less profitable crops that deserve a closer look. And that's just an important part of the overall success of farms. Then, in terms of research and extension and education, applied research, that's what fosters innovation in key areas such as pest management, nutrient and soil management. Extension is really important. Several years ago, Oregon Tilth's financial support helped launch an organic extension program at Oregon State University by covering a portion of an organic extension agent position. A few years later, we were able to secure some funding support from the legislature to increase what was a half-time organic extension agent to 2 full-time extension agents. And, extension's critical. That's what brings that innovation from the applied research and the latest education into the field through contact with farmers. And so that's why we really believe in and support OSU extension. And then the last piece that we partner with OSU on is really around needs assessment. And to me, this is actually where it all starts because, we really believe that good conversations need good listeners. And that's what needs assessments are about, is engaging farmers through individual interviews, small focus groups, and larger surveys to really help identify challenges and opportunities that can really inform the research and education priorities. And I wanted to talk about one of the examples of a needs assessment that we did with OSU, and you can go to the next slide, Carla. Several years ago, we, in partnership with OSU, administered a national survey to transitioning farmers. These were farmers that, through contracts that they'd gotten with the NRCS, had self-identified as transitioning to organic. And we had over 600 farmers across the country respond to this survey. And we asked them a lot of questions about motivations to transition, obstacles that they faced, what sorts of resources and support were most helpful during the transition process. And we published this report with our findings. And there's a lot of information in there. I'm going to kind of highlight a few key pieces. One of the things we did when we got the responses from these 600 farmers across the country is we actually segmented the survey responses into 4 different farmer categories. And those categories were 100% certified. So that meant by the time the survey reached them, they had completed the transition process and they had certified their entire farm operation as organic. So that was one category. Another category were farmers that were still in the transition process. They weren't done yet. And so the questions and how they answered them reflected where they were at in that process. The third category are what we called split farms. So these were farms that were doing both organic and non-organic. And that's totally possible. We have lots of farms that are doing both. And so we wanted to see, was their experience and their perspectives different? And then the last category were actually farms that had stopped pursuing organic transition. So for one reason or another, they started, but they didn't get all the way there. And they were an important segment and category to listen to as well. And so we really wanted to see across those categories, what they had in common and what was unique to the specific categories. So one of the things we did is we asked the farmers to rank what kinds of resources they found most helpful during transition. And not surprisingly, the top resources that they cited linked to the top obstacles and challenges that they faced. So, information on organic pest, disease, and weed management, that was way up there, as well as soil health. Information on organic markets also emerged as a helpful resource just to help them better understand opportunities and price premiums and what was happening in the marketplace to inform their decisions on where they should go. And then we also learned, not surprisingly, but it was good to hear it directly from the farmers, that they really value one-on-one learning and support. And in particular, they really valued learning from other experienced farmers. So that farmer-to-farmer info exchange was really important. We concluded the report with recommendations on what both the public and private sectors could do to support organic agriculture and those interested in transitioning to organic. And then a few years later, many of the recommendations in this report emerged as key tenets of a new USDA organic transition initiative. And you can go to the next slide. And so this USDA Organic Transition Initiative was announced late last year. It was a $300 million total investment over the next 5 years. And that investment was divided up into kind of 3 planks that the USDA identified. One is what they called the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. So $100 million was going towards that effort. Another was for direct farmer assistance, another $100 million, $75 million through NRCS and some of those working lands programs, $25 million through the RMA and crop insurance that's catered specifically for organic practices and organic markets and price premiums. And then the final $100 million of this investment was for what they called pinpointed market development. And that was really recognizing that, if we're going to encourage folks to transition to organic, we need to make sure that there's a market on the other end of that transition, ready to buy their products. And so if you can go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about that first part of the initiative, what they called the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. What they did here is they carved the country up into 6 regions. And so the Northwest region, it's an interesting way of defining the Northwest, but we have got 6 states, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, as well as Montana and Wyoming and Alaska. And so the way they drew these maps, they explained, was not so much by necessarily bioregion or even cropping systems, because there's quite a bit of diversity, as you'll see in our region, but they really wanted to mix geographically states that had higher numbers of organic operations, which, Oregon and Washington have are leaders in the country, with other states that were less. And so like Wyoming and Alaska, for instance, there are not as many organic farmers there. And so they kind of wanted to mix those by region. And then what they did is the USDA chose a regional lead for each of these parts of the country. And Oregon Tilth was chosen as the Northwest lead. And we now have a cooperative agreement with the USDA. And through this cooperative agreement and through this Transition to Organic Partnership Program, we'll be bringing in $15 million over the next 5 years to the Northwest, to those 6 states. And the idea with this, and you can go to the next slide, is there's an expectation that we as a lead cooperator for our region are going to work with diverse partners and actually pass through a lot of those federal dollars and funding to support those partners. And the partners are really diverse. We're working with state agencies, we're working with universities, we're working with nonprofits and other non-governmental organizations. And so we are targeting, at minimum 20 partners across the 6 states that we want to work with. We've already signed several partner agreements, and we're actively working on quite a few more, designing work plans, figuring out what can people do in their areas and areas of expertise to support this initiative. We're working on agreements both actively with ODA and OSU. And you can go to the next slide. And just to kind of talk about what's going to happen under this Northwest Transitioning to Organic Partnership Program and what all these partners, working on establishing. And again, this reflects some of the recommendations that we heard from that survey result. But one of them is creating a farmer-to-farmer mentorship and matching program so that, we're bringing together experienced organic farmers as mentors. We're compensating them for their expertise and skills and knowledge, and we're pairing them up with transitioning organic farmers, and making those matches and helping with onboarding and mentor compensation and mentor coaching. And the idea here is really recognizing that farmers really learn best from other farmers and creating a formal program to do that. And so we're actively soliciting both mentors and mentees. And so if you know anyone that's transitioning and could benefit from being paired with someone who's been through the transition for their cropping system, let them know. And on the other hand, if you know some experienced organic farmers that have figured some things out and have had success and are willing to share their experience and their knowledge through a mentor relationship, we're looking to sign those folks up as well. So there's this mentorship program. There's also technical assistance, providing technical assistance to everything from agronomy, organic certification, conservation planning, business development, including navigating that supply chain, regulations, marketing. So just on the ground technical assistance. We know that's a key part of what helps people succeed. And building community, which can include both face-to-face networking opportunities on field days and conferences, as well as online networks and resource hubs. And then the last piece is, we recognize to expand these organic markets and increase demand, the organic sector is going to require a workforce with knowledge of organic practices. And so we're going to work with educational and training institutions like OSU to help build organically focused workforce training and education. And I think, what I would say about this initiative, the Organic Transition Initiative, and this particular program of it and the dollars that are going to come to the Northwest, is it really represents a historic federal investment to support and expand the organic sector. And I see it as an opportunity to leverage and increase the impact of those federal dollars and investments by bringing some state level public and private investments to the table and just get more mileage out of those dollars. Getting close to the end, and we'll open it up for some questions soon. So the last thing I wanted to touch on, you can go to the next slide, Carla, is this organic market analysis and assessment. So last year, the Oregon legislature funded a market analysis of the Oregon organic sector as one of 5 emerging industries. And the process was administered through Oregon's Business Development Department, also known as Business Oregon. They just published the report that market assessment. There's a lot of detail in there. It's, I think, close to 100 pages. I'm not going to have time to go through it all with you, but some of the interesting findings from my perspective from that report, one of them, and I think this one I chose to call out because it kind of counters some, I think sometimes misperceptions about organic agriculture and farms. And what we learned was that 30%, so almost 1 in 3 of the certified organic farms in Oregon have annual sales over 250,000. And, that 250,000, that's how USDA defines a small farm. If you earn less than that, that's that definition. And so, yes, a lot of organic farms are smaller to mid-scale farms, are doing, direct market type operations, but there are quite a number, almost a third, that are larger scale. And in fact, while 30% had annual sales over 250,000, 21%, so about 1 in 5, had sales over 500,000. So organic farms, just like all farms in Oregon, come in all sizes. Another finding was we have good data on farm gate sales from USDA, National Ag Statistics Services, but we don't have good sales data further down the supply and value chain. And that's really where a lot of economic value and activity occurs. But the economic researchers, they did some extrapolations and they conservatively estimated that the revenue of processed organic products in the state is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $580 million. The final finding that I wanted to call out was that despite this continued growth of organic in Oregon and several different opportunities to help accelerate that growth, we're actually losing ground compared to some other leading states in the country. And the example that I found most striking is Pennsylvania, also kind of in the top 10 in the US of organic states and market. But Pennsylvania, recently they invested nearly $4 million through a state legislature kind of bill, state farm bill, they called it, and organic saw $4 million specifically from that bill. As a result, Pennsylvania's organic growth from 2008 to 2021. So in 2008, their farm gate sales of organic were 212 million. By 2021, that 212 million value was up to 1.1 billion. So grew by about $750 million in that period of time. Now, in contrast, you come to Oregon and you look at those same time periods. In 2008, our farm gate sales of organic were 155 million. And then by 2021, we went up to 386 million. So not even a 250 million increase. And so for us, that's the missed opportunity, the missed economic opportunity. And so if you go to the next slide, Carla, I served on the advisory committee for the work of this market analysis. And as part of the report, the advisory committee was invited to write an afterword and offer some recommendations based on finding. I wanted to highlight those quickly. Not surprisingly, we really emphasize the importance of technical assistance and applied research. And really the idea here is to expand on successful organic programs at OSU. We think there's really some opportunities and some gains that could be made in several different categories that Oregon does well in terms of agriculture: food grade grain, dairy and livestock, fruit and tree fruit, vineyards and hazelnuts are some of the top commodities where we see real opportunities. And the next is really the importance of addressing data gaps. The researchers, the economic firm that did this work, really struggled getting much data beyond the farm gate. And so another important part of the data gap is recognizing that we're only measuring certified organic because that's what we can easily identify. But there are a lot of small scale direct market farms in Oregon and across the country that are using organic practices but don't seek certification because their buyers don't need it or expect it. I'm good friends with Laura Masterson for 47th Avenue Farm. She was a former Board of Ag member, and she's an example of one of those farms that's using organic practices but doesn't get certified. And I actually think Shantae from Mudbone might be another one who's currently on the board. And so, because they're not certified and we can't easily identify them, the acreage and the economic footprint of all of those uncertified farms that are using organic practices aren't part of the analysis and report because we don't have that data. And we also really need better information and data on the rest of the value chain and a better understanding of where there's an unmet demand. Because again, if we're going to encourage transition, we want to make sure that when they complete that process, there's a demand there waiting for them. I'm going to try to go a little quicker because I want to leave time for questions. Obviously, a recommendation is let's use our strengths, identify what Oregon grows well and grow more of it in Oregon. What we found in the analysis is that a lot of retail sales of fresh produce of organic is met by importing organic products from out of the state that we can grow very well here. So there's an opportunity there for expansion. Market development and consumer education, like grow demand through trade missions, through marketing campaigns, through consumer outreach. And then finally, as you grow, you need to grow infrastructure, post-harvest handling and processing that creates opportunities for more storage capacity and more value-added products. And then you can go to the last slide. Carla, and on this last slide, I wanted to offer some closing thoughts, and that is that overall, the story I hope to tell here is that the growth and the increased impact of the organic sector is an indicator of its increased relevance and resiliency in the face of some changing agricultural landscapes and marketplace trends. And some people may frame organic as an either-or choice in terms of farm management systems, but I take a more inclusive perspective, and I really view organic as a both-and framework. And again, we certify many farms that are split operations with acreage and crops that are managed both organically and non-organically. And just a couple quick anecdotes of why I think that's important to call out and how it can benefit all of agriculture. Greg Harris at 3 Mile Canyon Farm, which pretty well known large farm operation here in Oregon, they have some of their acreage and crops certified organic. The dairy's not. But Greg mentioned as part of an OSU research community advisory network that I'm a part of with Dean Simonich on a recent call, we were talking about organic, and he said that those non-chemical means of pest management, biocontrols, and crop rotations that they're using at 3 Mile Canyon, and this is a quote from Greg, I think organic farming has made us better conventional farmers. And he can apply what he's learning in the organic systems to some of his non-organic practices. And another anecdote similar to that was, I think we all remember in June of 2021, the heat dome event that really shocked us all and was ravaging to certain crops across the state. There was an anecdote from the field from one of our farm inspectors that was visiting an Oregon farm soon after that heat dome event. And this was a split operation. They had 170 acres in organic and 6,000 acres in non-organic. And when the inspector was down there, the farmer told him that his organic field of fresh peas yielded higher than any of his non-organic fields, with harvests occurring right after that extreme heat dome event. And some of his non-organic fields had only 10% of their normal yields. They were really decimated by the heat. But what he noticed was those organic field peas, they weathered that heat better, and he attributed that to the organic matter in the soil that had a higher water holding capacity, better drought and heat resistance in those extreme conditions. And so that to me is this notion that all farmers can improve soil health and increase their resiliency by just selective adoption of certain organic practices, like cover cropping, crop rotations, conservation tillage. You can meet farmers where they're at, and they can use some of these practices to their benefit without going all the way to all the practices necessary to get organically certified and get those premiums. And so I think that investments in organic can really support all of Oregon agriculture. So I'll stop there, and we've got, I think, a little bit of time for any follow-up questions. And thanks again.
I have a question, Chris. Lauren, Acting Director. One, I just wanted to echo the wonderful partnership we have and your approach. I really appreciate it and appreciate you being here today, more than you know. I wanted to ask a question about a number that you had. It was on the organic market analysis, and I have not read that whole thing, and I want to. I just haven't been able to. But one of the things that I have talked to anyone that will listen to me, whether it's legislative or other things, is really trying to help our farmers that are in the middle. Everybody has challenges, and I don't want to minimize that. Is that percent 30%, and then the one below it 63%? Does that mean there are 7% that are in the middle of that 10 to 250, or am I looking at that wrong?
Let me see here.
Do you see what my question is?
I'm trying to pull up that slide on my screen again.
Oh, it's 19.
Yeah. So
So if 30% have sales over 250,
right,
and 63 have less than 10.
Okay, so
or am I looking at that wrong?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I want to be clear on what we're saying there. So, there's this statistic. Let me pull that up because I've got it. Oregon has a lot of farms, and one of the critiques I sometimes encounter is well, geez, the number of organic farms is this sliver of the total farms in Oregon. And so from the report, Oregon has a total number of 37,300 farm operations. And so the stat there of the 63% that are less than 10,000, that's across all of those total farm operations. So we have 37,300 farms in Oregon, but 23,500 or 63% of those farms, and this is all farms, are grossing less than 10,000 annually.
Oh, so that is not 63%
of organic. Yeah, no, yes. And so it's I think our point is making sense of the numbers. It's we have a lot of farms, but if you're earning less than $10,000 a year, you've probably got some off-farm income helping you make your livelihood. And so if we set aside that set of less than $10,000, the share of the remaining farms in Oregon that are organic is actually larger because those are farms that are making livelihoods and are really more commercial type operations. And so that was what we were trying to say is that, how do we look at these pictures and these numbers to really understand what representation organic has? And more than anything, kind of dispel this myth that, all organic farms are these tiny little farms. We do have small direct market farms, and organic prices are one way to make those farms financially viable, but there are a lot of larger scale and larger grossing farms that are certified organic as well.
Okay, thank you. I thought there was something wrong with how I was looking at that. And
great question, Laurie.
I appreciate. I kind of tricked you into talking about one of my most favorite numbers is the 37,000 farms in Oregon, because I talk about that a lot, and 97% of those are family farms, and a lot of them are here in these numbers. So thank you for that.
Good.
Elin Miller for the record. Thank you for being here. I hearken back to my past. About 35 years ago, I was running the largest regional pesticide trade association in the United States. And we made a pretty important decision, I think, at that time to say, look, and I liked one of your last slides is organic is a choice. And so we had said people have the right to choose whether they want organic or traditional. And as I read through, because I haven't been as close to this for a while, I guess one of my questions and concerns is I'm a farmer and I want to have choices. And I do practice lots of organic stuff, which we basically call IPM in the past on our farm. And my concern would be if it's ever positioned as a them and us situation, because the practices used in conventional, traditional, transitional, whatever, are also government certified, or safety issues are looked at, and all those kinds of things are looked at. So if it's a trade-off to say we're the only ones thinking about soil health, we're the only ones thinking about animal welfare because we don't do testing on our products, or we're only thinking about those kind of things, I worry about some, backlash in agriculture or potential negativity. And when you said you were serving on that group with a couple noteworthy people, and it's always good to have people working together and trying to solve problems together, but where is the organic industry now as far as kind of them and us, as far as you choose us and we're in this place which is better than those other guys? I still am kind of reading that into this, but I may be misreading that.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the question for sure. And I would say personally, how I show up, and it has a lot to do with my background, which I didn't share with you all, but like I grew up here in Oregon, in Willamette Valley. My family's farm is Shriner's Iris Gardens. It's fourth generation iris producers, flowers. Grew up working on that farm. Not an organic farm. We use pre-emergent herbicides, they use fungicides, they use synthetic fertilizers. That was my experience of agriculture growing up. And then later, after graduating university, I also had an experience of working on a small organic farm for a year, direct market. I'm in Cresswell, Oregon. And so, I've seen both sides, both types of systems, and that's really the space that I come from. And when I think of food and ag in particular, the reality is agricultural producers and farmers are a very small percentage of the population. And so I'm not a fan of division. And, I think there are a lot of forces, especially seems more and more in our culture these days, that seek to divide and create us versus them polarities. That's that either or framework that I was talking about. And I resist that. I really do. I think as an advocate for organic practices, we try to meet farmers where they're at and share what's helpful. And that's why I think those split operation examples are good examples. Now, you asked where is the organic industry at? And I would say that, at the end of the day, organic is a market label, and in the marketplace, there's this effort to differentiate, right? Differentiation. That's the game of, marketing. So I don't know that we'll ever get away from that, because that's kind of how people try to stand out in the marketplace with consumer choice. But I can say that in terms of Oregon Tilth as an organic advocate, now that I've been the ED for a decade, my approach is more collaborative, more inclusive, and that's how I choose to go about being an advocate. And that's also why, earlier when I was doing my Organic 101, it's like, you probably have heard what we're prohibiting and what we're opposed to, but I'd like you to hear more often what we're promoting and what we're supporting: soil health, biodiversity, natural resources conservation. And I certainly recognize and agree that those practices and those goals are not the exclusive purview of organic. I think all farmers should share those goals, because without them, you won't be farming for very long. So that's my perspective on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Chris and I, Lauren Henderson, Chris and I, through our are they quarterly meetings? Quarterly. Yeah, quarterly meetings. And that's one of the reasons why we have the quarterly meetings, is to establish those relationships and that. And I can tell you, Chris comes to every one of those and every conversation I've had with the tone that you just saw here. And it is so important, because you didn't say it, but coexistence in Oregon is everything. And we certainly work at the department to try to be in that space to provide the information. And I believe, as long as I'm an acting director and part of the agency, that there's a place for everyone, as long as people keep talking. They have to keep talking. And so we'll keep working on that. I know Chris will keep working on it. I'm excited about the federal program that they have, and we'll be a part of that to the extent that we can be with the limited resources. But it's an important conversation to keep having, and not have it be us for this versus them. It does not need to be that way. And I'm more excited about Oregon Tilth, particularly with the technical assistance that you talked about in this slide, and that's knowledge is everything for people, because it's amazing how people get turned on something that somebody said that may not be quite right, or maybe applied differently for each one. And we all know the geography of our state and how different it is and how different folks apply. And then we add all of the pest pressures and all of these other things. And how do you mitigate those things? So it's an important conversation, I think, going forward. We will keep our quarterly sessions and whatever we need to. They've been very, very productive and have been very helpful for me particularly.
Chad Allen for the record. I seen you guys have an office in Mexico. I'm assuming for certification of imports.
Mm-hmm.
What's the export opportunity for organics? And have you guys participated in any of the trade missions that are outside of the United States, or is it mainly domestic exports outside of Oregon that you're looking at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So there is organic product that's being exported, and some of the clients we certify, especially the bigger ones, they are accessing those markets. Organic has been part of trade missions. Oregon Tilth has not, but the Trade Association gets some of those. I think it's MAP, Market Access Program, federal dollars to do some trade mission work. For our clients, we see products going to the Pacific Rim, Japan, like the customers there. There's, especially from Oregon, like Oregon has kind of this green mystique, and then you layer that with organic. So there's been products going to different markets in the Pacific Rim, and also to the UK and Europe as well. So that's been another destination of some organic products. Yeah. I think there's opportunity for more there, to be honest with you. Yeah.
I just want to ask if someone joining us in the virtual have a question for you. Just want to give them the opportunity. Do you have that, Carla? No one has asked any question?
Eden or, Randy or Eric are online.
Randy, Eric, do you have a question? Just want to connect with the members that join us. I had a question, Luisa Santamaria, here. Well, you mentioned that there are some farms that are already practicing some organic practices, right? But what is the reason that you can see that they haven't joined to be certified? I don't know, how long is the process, or what makes them don't wish to have that certification?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think the short answer is their buyers don't expect it. So there's the distance between them and their customers is so short that they can visit the farm, or they know that farmer, and there's enough trust that they don't need that third party verification. And so it's when you've got longer supply chains or consumer facing products that want to use that USDA organic seal, which is a regulated seal, that the certification brings value. And I mean, certification costs money. It's, there's a cost there. And so I think for those smaller direct market operations that are using organic practices but opt not to get certified, they don't feel like the costs of the certification process, the extra record keeping that they have to maintain to, when our inspectors come, show them that they're meeting the standards, they don't feel that their customers expect it, and they can still get whatever prices support their operations and reflect their practices. So I think that's the main reason why.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, I think we have one more item in our agenda today, and is Amcua Valley Farm to School. I'm going to call Erin Maidlow, the Executive Director, to present us about the topic. Thank you.
Hello. Some things to pass out to each of you. These are our Umpqua Grown Guides that we produce each year. It's an annual publication with all the local farms, restaurants, wineries, breweries, all that be one that's using local products. Sorry, I'm gonna squeeze through here. Nice to meet you. And then do you want the rest of this? Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks for having us today. I was invited to talk about our specialty crop block grant that we got back in 2020. Do you have the slides?
Could you introduce the game?
Oh, yeah.
And this, yeah.
Do you have the slides? Okay. I'm Erin Maidlow from Umpqua Valley Farm to School. I'm the executive director there. We are a local nonprofit organization. We actually were started in 2010 as Thriving Waters in Glide, Oregon, which was a really tiny nonprofit focused on community beautification in Glide, Oregon, which if any of you have ever been out to Glide, it's a really tiny, Elin, I know you have, unincorporated town. And so one of their original visions of Thriving Waters was to do school garden work, and they just never had the capacity to. So in 2019, the director of that was ready to retire, and excuse me. I was working in a different job and doing farm to school work, but I wanted to expand that in Douglas County. So I took over the nonprofit and we expanded and grew into Umpqua Valley Farm to School. You can go to the next slide, please. So this is our mission. We believe food security begins with a strong community connection to the land and its food. By supporting local food systems and providing education to Douglas County youth, Umpqua Valley Farm to School cultivates skills and passion to build food community connections. UVF2S aims to achieve an equitable and sustainable food system that nurtures and strengthens Douglas County's people and economy. So we do this by working primarily with students in schools. We do a little bit of pre-K all the way up to high school and beyond. You can go to the next slide. Actually, the next one after that's fine. So a little bit of background. I already said we started in 2010 in Glide as this tiny nonprofit and then expanded in 2019. I've been the regional procurement and education coordinator for the statewide farm to school network. I think, gosh, for 6 years or so now. And what that means is Oregon Farm to School and School Garden Network has regional coordinators that work in each region throughout the state. And we help with the Oregon Farm to School program through the Department of Education, facilitating, getting schools involved, reminding nutrition directors how much money they have left to spend on their grants, connecting farms with schools and getting their products into schools, and then also supporting schools who are interested in doing school garden education or building gardens or any questions or resources they might need about school gardens. So in 2019, I transitioned that over to Umpqua Valley Farm to School 2, and now we work with about 21 schools doing procurement. So all schools in the state of Oregon that are public schools get procurement funds to buy local produce or products. It doesn't have to be produce. And so 21 of those schools in Douglas County are getting those procurement funds and spending them on local products. A lot of the smaller standalone schools like Reedsport, Oakland, Sutherland, they are pretty consistent on buying local products right now. They've built their own connections with the farmers. We started them and then they just took off on their own. They're now, they have weekly deliveries of produce from local farms, which is awesome. The larger school districts like Roseburg, Winston, Dillard, they need a lot more help and it's a lot more complicated for them to buy local, but we do still help them quite a bit. They, Estill Farms is a blueberry farm here that's a really big supporter of school meals, and so they get their frozen blueberries into school meals a lot. So a lot of the schools around they spend their non-competitive funds and then they can apply for competitive funds. And so this year we had quite a few schools and organizations who were able to apply for those competitive funds and spend well beyond their original allocated non-competitive procurement funds. As the education coordinator for our region, we provide technical assistance to schools and organizations through school garden consultations. So I go to schools that are interested in building a school garden, or they might have one. We've actually got 31 school gardens in Douglas County, which is pretty impressive for our very rural county. 23 of those are active. So there's a lot of them that are just kind of sitting there. And there's a lot more interest right now in getting them going. So I'll go to the school and do a half an hour to an hour consultation. And we walk around and check out their garden space. Is this in a good space? Fencing is always an issue because we always have deer that love those school garden buffets. We help with grant writing, which has been a huge area in the last couple of years that schools have asked for help with or just appreciated the resources that we can offer. We send grant resources to schools. I think this year we helped write 4 or 5, pretty much all of the grants through Oregon Department of Education's Farm to CMP program this year. We helped write resource sharing, trainings, curriculum, and school garden policy. We hold quarterly garden hub gatherings where anyone with a school garden or interested in school gardenings in Douglas County is welcome to attend. Those are where we share a lot of the resources. So a lot of times we'll all sit down together and go over a grant. Like, do you want to apply for this? Do you qualify? What are some points you need to add into your application? And those are always fun. We visit different gardens around the county too, and we get to tour them so that, sometimes schools come that are interested in a garden, they can see what works and what doesn't at other gardens. And we have presentations by each of the hosts at those school gardens. Okay, you can go to the next slide. And then you might need to just keep kind of, yeah. So these were our project goals of the Specialty Crop Block Grant. The first one was building an on-farm program for use with the Farm to School program in local schools in Douglas County. Building farm field trips where students gained hands-on experience. So we had a few small, usually private schools that would visit farms. We didn't have a very robust farm to school program in Douglas County. When we first got our ODE farm to school grants, it was during the pandemic. Like, we wrote the grants, we got them, and 2 months later the pandemic hit. So we had these huge plans to do all these field trips and fun things with students, and then we were in distance learning. So this project came at a very interesting time when we got the grant for this too. But I'll go into detail about that a little bit later too. Increasing fruit and vegetable consumption by doing the farm field trips and in-school education. Providing technical assistance for farmers around farm to school. And what that meant was insurance, liability requirements, best practice for selling to schools with food safety and washing. A lot of, I think the original guidelines was that farms have to be GAP certified for schools to buy from them. So we clarified a lot of that. And then for the field trips, age appropriate activities. One of the goals of this is not just for us to do the farm field trips, but to get the farms ready so that they can host them on their own without us facilitating them. Increase market opportunities for local farms. And so that's why I gave you that Umpqua Grown Guide. And then increase the capacity of Umpqua Valley Farm to School in order to sustain the Farm to School program and provide farmer trainings. You can go ahead and switch to the next slide. So our farm field trips, building on-farm programs for use with the Farm to School program in local schools. One of the goals of building these farm field trips was to create the sustainable program, not just for us, like I said, but for schools too, and for farms so that they can host these field trips on their own. So we visited lots of farms. Our original Specialty Crop Block Grant had 4 farms involved. After researching that a lot and talking to the farms that were involved, there were really 2 that stood out that were able to provide farm field trips and that we're comfortable with providing them during the pandemic. So Laney Farm and Valadez Organic Produce are two of the farms that we worked pretty exclusively with on this. We did video farm field trips at Myrtle Creek Farm, and but they were not comfortable with having students on their farm, which is understandable during the pandemic. So like I said, we walked the farms through the liability requirements. You know, the farms are all different. Laney Farm offers tractor rides, so we really had to check in with like what liability does the school hold over the students? What does the farm need? What does our organization need? And that's been really helpful. I just had a farm last week ask me about liability. They're talking to their own insurance company right now about what they need to have. And actually the schools cover the students completely, but it's nice to be triple covered everywhere on that. So that's been a really valuable training that we offer. The hands-on experience, I have a video in here in a little bit that you'll get to see the hands-on experience, but we want to make sure kids aren't just visiting a farm and doing, a tractor tour and that's it. We want them to see what a day in a life on a farm is like. What do farmers do? What do they, what can students learn on a farm? So we have them hop off the tractor, they get to harvest, they get to talk to farm workers. While they're with us, they prepare a meal on the farm and they get to try it using produce that we got from the farm. And then they also get to do a science activity. So we've done worm activities, which is really fun to do the worm activities right before they try food. So hand wash stations have been really important. They got to do soil testing. So they put soil in a jar and shook it up with water and they watch it settle over the next couple days when they take it back to their school. They do some planting activities. Some of them plant pumpkins on the farm and then they get to go in the spring and they get to go back in the fall to the pumpkin patch. So we just did our spring field trips where they planted pumpkin seeds and then they'll go back in the fall and get to harvest. So it's really fun for kids to get to see, like, this is how long it takes for that seed to turn into a pumpkin that I'm going to harvest in October. Let's see. So we also create curriculum and we offer that to farms too. It's been really interesting to see the farms take off on these field trips on their own. Some of them are great and do provide that curriculum or a lesson for kids to do on the farms, and some of them are still like, can you guys come do these field trips with us? And we're happy to do that when we have time. But a lot of it's just like a scavenger hunt that the kids can do on the farm. So since our original field trips in 2021, several farms have hosted their own field trips without our assistance. Laney Farm has done some smaller field trips on their own, and Valadez does a lot of field trips to their farm. So we're really just excited that this has kind of boosted agritourism in our area and gotten way more kids out to local farms than it had before. And you can switch to the next slide. Oh, I think you need to click one more time. And so if you can click the link up there, this is one of the videos that we had created for a farm field trip. So we did a really long video, but I thought I'd spare you because it was 7.5 minutes. So this is the shorter one. Did you ever get the links to work?
I did, but it's not sharing it.
I can.
It's in YouTube.
This one should be a YouTube link. I think I can look it up and.
Yeah, sorry, it's not transitioning to the other screen. You have to open YouTube. Sorry.
If I email this to you, can you pull it up? Oops.
It's not that we don't have it, it's not getting up on the screen.
Right, okay. Well, that's a bummer.
I will share the link out, or we can play it at the end, maybe.
Okay. Well, like I said, when we wrote this, it was 2019. The pandemic had not happened yet. We had no clue. I think we submitted in January that year. And then in 2020, in March, is when the pandemic hit. So we may have gotten word that we got this grant either right before or right after the pandemic. So we were like, what do? We already had virtual field trips scheduled to do in it because we'd done some little ones before. We'd done some virtual lessons. When this organization started, it was just me doing lessons at 3 schools. And so we were doing a lot of virtual lessons where we would record ourselves, painting in the garden or, talking about seed germination or reading books. So we sort of had that on deck already, but we couldn't do those field trips right away. So we made these virtual field trips. So if you do get to watch that one, it's really fun. We hired someone to put it together. So it's way better quality than I could ever do. So those field trips were the first field trips that kids got to go on in a long time. Some of them had never been on a field trip. A lot of them had never visited a local farm. So their first post-pandemic field trip, I think we were still wearing masks at that time too. They visited a farm, they got to be outside, they got to ride a tractor around, they got to try new foods. It was really exciting to see kids outside and doing these activities again after being inside for so long. We became professionals at creating video lessons and activity kits for youth to do at home. During the pandemic, we were literally putting together hundreds of little gift bags full of activity kits for kids to do at home. We'd drop them off at schools. We'd harvest all the produce from the garden. And when parents drove through to get their lessons for the month or whatever, they could pick up our activity kit. And we even built, we put wood in there and we did videos so that kids could build their own planter box, and we had seeds and soil so that they could grow along with us while we were growing in the garden. And we did videos of us, tending the garden each week. So that was pretty exciting. We're very happy to be back in person, but it was really cool to be able to still do these lessons. And like I said, we had a couple farms that were not comfortable doing the field trip. So that was one of the questions in the final report for us, was what was one of the challenges? And that was the challenge. Like, we wrote this in, what do we do now that these farms don't want to do field trips? So we just increased the field trips that we did at the other farms and made it work. Okay, so the Laney Farm field trip that you'll see in there, that's the spring field trip. And then those same kids, we did them with 4th and 5th graders. So as 4th graders, they went in the spring, and then they had the opportunity to go back in the fall as 5th graders and see the difference in the farm. And obviously in the fall, it's completely different. They got to harvest apples, peppers, pumpkins, just a whole, different world on the farm at that time. Okay, the producer gatherings. So this is where some of our trainings took place. I visit farms a lot and talk with farmers. How many of the rest of you are farmers? Can I ask? Oh, good. Okay, so
All of us.
good. Farmers, I don't know how often you want to fill out surveys from people. It's not a thing that I have found most of our farmers have time for. So sending out surveys, we don't get like a huge response from our farmers, but I visit the farms a lot. And so I just kind of ask through the questions while we're there. And the producer gatherings we do have a pretty good attendance for that. And that's a way, I can compile all this information that I've grabbed from farmers while I'm visiting their farms and provide resources to answer their questions while at these producer buyer gatherings. We recently opened a commercial kitchen in January of 2023 in downtown Roseburg, and that came about from a food hub feasibility study that we did over the course of 2019 and 2020. And we saw a need. We had 25 people. They did actually answer that survey that said one of the needs was a commercial kitchen to increase the sales of value-added products on their farm. A lot of times, like Laney Farm is making soup in our kitchen. To have a commercial kitchen at your own place, there's a lot of regulations around that. And so it was just easier for us to have one. They can lease the space and do their products. So we held our gathering there. We invited buyers from restaurants to schools to institutions, and then producers. So any farm, any farmer, anyone interested in farming or producing products is welcome to come. We had people from like fisheries from the coast coming out. And that was really cool. We built a lot of lasting partnerships. One of the areas at the first producer buyer gathering that we now realize we need to focus on a bit more is bringing more buyers in. I think there were 3 or 4 buyers, but about 20 farms. And so all these farms are really eager to get their products into restaurants. And restaurants, you know, they're busy too. So it's really hard to bring them in. So we're going to do another buyer gathering soon where we do focus more on bringing buyers to the table so that these farms have an extra outlet to get their products out there. At that training or at that gathering, the Oregon Department of Ag Inspector Linda White was there, who is at my kitchen right now. We had county health inspectors there that could answer questions. We do a harvest of the month in all of our schools, and so the harvest of the month features a different product each month that's grown in Oregon, and we try and feature farms that have those products, and we also try and feature BIPOC farms or historically underserved farms in Oregon that have those products so that schools can buy from them and that students at the schools from diverse backgrounds see that, like, hey, I can be a farmer one day. I can grow these products and make these products too. Like I said, we anticipate a buyer-focused gathering in the coming months to draw in more restaurants and institutions. We're working on a farm to institution program with Amy Gilroy at the Department of Agriculture as well to focus more on those institutional buyers. One of the original goals also talked about buying seeds from farms. The farmers that we work with are not seed growers, and we didn't really see a huge need for schools to purchase seeds from farms. We did, however, build really valuable relationships with farmers where they donate their extra seedlings to us. And so we get those extra seedlings out to all the school gardens. So we've gotten hundreds and hundreds of seedlings from tomatoes to kale to Brussels sprouts from farms that we were able to put into school gardens. And some of the schools, like Growing Miracles Lavender Garden, has donated lavender. And so the schools have like a special spot in their garden that's dedicated to the different farms of Douglas County, where they can say, like, Douglas County grows a lot of lavender, and this is what we got from one of the lavender growers. Okay, you can switch to the next slide. And I don't know if you're going to be able to click on the link in this, but you have the guide. The link is just our website for Umpqua Grown. So you can check that out too. It's an online, it's basically the magazine online, and there is a PDF of it, but there's also, you can click on the buyers, and we are hiring someone to help us with the website because it's a full-time job, I think. But we have listings for each of the farms on the website, and you can search them by product. So if you want to find, I don't know, kale in Douglas County, you can go to that page and find the farms, or you can search by farms that accept SNAP benefits or WIC or that are at the Umpqua Valley Farmers Market. So this is an annual publication designed in partnership with Thrive Umpqua, Feeding Umpqua, Rogue Food Unites, and OSU Extension in Douglas County. Last year and this year, we printed 7,500 copies of the guide. Last year, was our first year. It took us pretty much the whole year to get all 7,500 copies out. This year, we got them all out in a month and a half, which is pretty exciting that people, like, it took us 1 year and people are really into it now. So next year, we're increasing our production, doing 10,000 copies. But we were able to use some of the funds from the Specialty Crop Block Grant on this, since one of the goals was to increase marketing and visibility for our local farms. So I'm also on the Umpqua Valley Farmers Market board, and part of the Specialty Crop Block Grant was to interview farms and ask if their sales had increased. And like I said, not a whole lot of them want to answer surveys, but I do have the data from the farmers market. And so since 2020, each of our board meetings, we have like the percentage in sales. And since 2020, we have seen increases in sales at our farmers market. In fact, in May was our biggest farmers market with the most vendors we've had. We had 51 vendors present. And so our little Umpqua Valley Farmers Market is considered a large market according to Oregon Farmers Market Association. So if any of y'all are not from here and get a chance to stop by on Saturdays, you should check out our farmers market. It's pretty impressive. So our next publication, we're including cycling maps that go past local farms. We want to create a farm tour similar to Rogue farm tour. I think that's what it's called, Rogue Valley Farm Tour. We work closely with Rogue Valley Food Systems Network. And so part of that partnership is like regional food hub, food systems work. And that's why, you know, a lot of the work that we do does mirror what they're doing down there. But we would love to do a farm tour in Douglas County. And so we're working on that in future years. But for now, the bike tour, we're creating self-guided bike routes that go past wineries and farms. And then eventually we'll have partnerships with farms where the farms can open up a farm stand on certain days of the year for folks to stop at. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? So I tried to keep this not super data heavy because I know y'all are here for a couple days for meetings and probably have a lot of that coming in. But we did survey our students before and after our field trips to see what they had learned. So 365 students were surveyed who attended the farm field trips. 314 of them stated that they do understand what a specialty crop is now, which is pretty big for a kid. Like, they're fruit and vegetables. You know, kids don't know what specialty crops are, so now they do. 289 of them stated that they will eat more specialty crops in the future. So we did a lot of cute videos, and I'm not the most technologically advanced either. But we do have a lot of cute videos of kids explaining what the new fruits and vegetables are that they tried. And I meant to bring, we have posters each time we do a tasting in schools, and we have them put a little dot. So we did like rhubarb muffins, and they get to put a dot on whether they liked it, loved it, or didn't like it yet. And almost every tasting that we've done, the kids say that they loved it more than anything else. So we've even done like pickled cauliflower, which to me, I'm like, are kids gonna like this? And they loved it. Like, they came back for more, which is pretty impressive. I've got 2 kiddos, and I don't know that they would try pickled cauliflower. And then 326 stated that they'd eaten more specialty crops since this program began. So that's a huge percentage of that 365. And I think this is, you can go to the next slide. The picture in the background of that last one is actually the principal of one of the schools enjoying a salad from their school garden. So everything those kids were eating, if the block weren't in the way, came from their school garden, which is pretty cool. And that one is actually run by a teacher at the school. We did not help with that school garden. So always impressed when schools can actually manage their own school gardens on their own without our assistance, because it's not easy to add that to the day. Okay, now you can go to the last slide. So increased capacity of Umpqua Valley Farm to School. This was kind of like a selfish ask for this grant, but it's one of the things that I'm most excited for. Like I said, when I first wrote this grant in 2019, the organization was transitioning from Thriving Waters into Umpqua Valley Farm to School, and it was me. I was able to hire one AmeriCorps employee that first year, member that first year. So it was just the 2 of us doing lessons at schools. Since this has been written, this was like our launching point, the Specialty Crop Block Grant. This gave us the funds to have our program. Without this, we definitely would not be where we are. We were only doing virtual lessons. Now we work with over 2,000 students a year and have over 8,000 engagements with those students. We do food tastings every month at 4 different schools in the cafeteria. So every student at every school every month gets a chance to try those Oregon Harvest of the Month products. So they're tasting a new Oregon grown product. We always buy those products from local farms. We do direct education with 9 schools. So I have 3 AmeriCorps service members right now, and I was able to hire an education coordinator who helps take some of the load off of me. So she's also a farmer, which is really exciting to have a farmer on our team. And we hired a farmer to manage one of our school farms at Phoenix School, which is a 2-acre farm. So she's growing seedlings for all the other elementary school gardens and then managing the 2-acre school farm at Phoenix School. So this has just been you know, like I said, the launching point for Umpqua Valley Farm to School. We're very grateful that we were able to use these funds from the Specialty Crop Block Grant to build the programs that we have. Since this grant, we've hosted 15 farm field trips on our own, and then schools outside of our organization have visited local farms as well. I think There's several private schools that have, and then even some of the Roseburg public schools have set up farm field trips on their own to visit too. So it's just grown, you know, an interest in local farms a lot between the Umpqua Grown Guide, between our program, between the Oregon Department of Education, farm to school grants. There's just been a huge growth in farm to school education in Douglas County. And so we're really excited about that. And that's it. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free.
Lauren Henderson, you should be proud of what you've done. That's a exciting story that the grants are able to help you do that and give you that launch pad. I mean, that's a big part of what they're for, right, is to give people a little bit of a nudge so they can get started. So I'm very excited and keep it up. It's great work.
Thank you.
I remember he was probably a fifth grader, maybe, in one of the early farm to school discussions at the legislature. And I'm not a very adventurous eater, as my staff knows. However, this little young man through a farm to school program came and testified that he grew kale. And he was so proud of kale, but he had no idea what it was or what it tasted like. But actually, when it was time to harvest it, he actually didn't think it tasted too bad. And his mom was in there and goes, "Oh my gosh, she's gonna eat a vegetable." So that was a fun little story. And that was many years ago, right? So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's always funny. We have a lot of the kitchen staff at schools. A lot of times they don't want to take the produce. So that's one of the things that we've done is created like, here's how you accept produce from the garden. But they'll say, my kids won't eat that. And I'm like, the kids eat it in the garden, straight out of the garden, bugs and all. Like we can't even rinse it off in time and they're eating it. So it's really exciting. And then when I'm at grocery stores and stuff too, kids are always like, look, I'm buying these carrots that I tasted today in your class. So it is exciting to see. I mean, kids eat my kids go out. My son pulled up an entire broccoli plant and was eating the leaves on it. So they will eat what they can grow. So it is really rewarding to see them doing that. So thank you all. Thanks for having me, and thank you for this grant.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was very nice. I don't know, we don't have any more questions, so I think we're done with our items in the agenda. And just some notes for what is coming. We have this afternoon a tour for the board members. I think everybody got a agenda for this afternoon. So board members at ODAs, please be ready to depart at 1 p.m. We will not be returning to this location this afternoon, so please take your personal items with you. We will have lunch, I guess, some point for all the board members and the ODA staff. So tomorrow morning, we will start at 8:15 a.m. Carla mentioned yesterday or this morning, we will have host a coffee with the board. That is what it's going to be called. It's a new experience to try to connect with the community. This will be an opportunity for industry representatives, community members, and ODA staff from the local area to visit with board members prior to start the board meeting. So, and then the board meeting will reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, so June 15, just to let you know. So thank you very much for your participation today. So we are done for the morning, I guess. Any comment? No? So, done.
Thanks regarding lunch.
Oh, the video?
Yeah, did we?